Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, July 1st, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Heather Parton, or Digby, from the blog Hullabaloo and Salon.com to look back on this exhausting week. Meanwhile, conservatives and corporate polluters celebrate the Supreme Court's crushing the EPA's ability to protect our environment and slow climate change. That same court also allows the Biden administration to end the so-called Remain in Mexico policy. The court announces it will decide whether states can ignore the results of elections and send alternate electors to Washington, among other things. Speaking of alternate electors, January 6th Commission has evidence of attempted witness tampering. And Joe Biden, while he says he supports a filibuster to carve out abortion rights, is also nominating an anti-abortion judge to the federal bench in a supposed deal with Mitch McConnell. Florida judge temporarily blocks a 15-week abortion ban as women across the country are denied health care because of other bans. New York State rushes to patch the concealed carry laws in the wake of a Supreme Court decision. Mitch McConnell threatens Democrats he'll hold the semiconductor manufacturing bill hostage if Democrats attempt to do anything along the lines of a completely anemic and shrunken down Build Back Better bill. Lastly, recession fears mount as a result of the Fed's desperate attempt to quash wages. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is the end of the week. I am joined, of course, by Emma Vigeland. What a week, Emma.
What a week. What a week. It feels like I was here for all 5 days, and I just was not. I was not. And yet, like, the emotional toll of this week is multiple weeks combined.
We're going to talk to Heather Parton about this, but in many respects, this is, God, I use this metaphor too often, but this is the famous Bruce Lee. I don't even know if Bruce Lee actually did this. I can't even remember anymore. But the supposed kidney punch, where 3 weeks later the person drops dead. This week was essentially foretold 6 years ago. And we've had a long time to sort of absorb it and prepare for it. And because of the nature of this sort of like this being rolled out, it doesn't have the same impact as the night when Donald Trump won, but this is what it is. And we'll talk more about this with Heather. And we'll talk about it, I imagine, in the next 2.5 years. This will come up a lot.
And frankly, I think maybe the bleeding would have been slowed a little, or at least the pain associated with it, if the President of the United States response hasn't been so incredibly dispiriting. I mean, we can't do anything is basically all we've gotten from leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was certainly ways that they could mitigate the situation, but the bottom line is, they're
No, I
not going to
know.
be able to do anything. They're not going to be able to do anything about the EPA, for instance. I mean, the totally dismantling of
Yes.
the administrative state is. I'm not sure what the answer is to that. Frankly,
I mean,
I don't know what
Biden
it-
doesn't. They don't have a plan for Roe, so they definitely don't have a plan for the dismantling of the administrative state.
But as a political matter, it would have been nice for them to speak up. But the bottom line is that we're going to get, and certainly we will, and we have criticized the nature and the lack of the Democratic response. But let's be clear here. This is being done by the conservative movement, and it is being done by the Republican Party. And there was an experiment waged both in 2000, for that matter, and in 2016. Do Democrats learn some type of magic? Is there a Democratic brain that exists that controls all Democrats? And does that brain learn a lesson when the candidate who should win didn't win? And we can either say it was because people stayed at home and they were trying to send a message or not, or whatever. But if you want an experiment as to what happens when you empower Republicans, we have the results of the experiment. And part of the inputs into that experiment is an anemic Democratic Party. This was all knowable in 2016. It was. And, people keep asking me to reissue the debate with Jimmy Dore because it was the one place where it's sort of like we had that argument. Although we were saying this
you
all
should.
throughout. Well, we will, but
why
but
not?
we will. But we were saying this throughout the whole summer. And it wasn't just Republicans bad. It is Republicans bad and Democrats not good at stopping them.
Yeah, if you agree they're a bad opposition, then you don't want them in opposition.
Exactly. And I mean, we have the results of that experiment. It's right in front of you. You don't have to think about the hypothetical. I mean, I've seen tweets, people saying like, I've never been more proud to have not voted for Joe Biden. If you vote for a sense of pride, then you don't understand what voting is supposed to be about. Voting is not an art project. Voting is not a way to give yourself a medal. Voting is not an expression of who you are inside. It sounds laughable, but
No, it's the narcissism of it. I mean, we were having to not to relitigate this from 2016, but that is that this is the exact debate that we were having, the exact impulses that we were combating.
Exactly. And it is a tool. And if you have a plan that involves voting for one choice that will lead to the best outcomes, and I kept begging people for that is called a theory of change in the context of electoralism. There's other theories of change you can apply. But like, if you can come up with that and sell it, I'm all ears. But it's just sort of just bizarre to watch people go like, I'm proud of the fact that I didn't vote for either one of the candidates. You know what? You're an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that voters en masse should move away from a lesser of two evils approach for nothing. Like, there's no alternative. It's just out of your theory of how it's not going to solve the problems, which it might not, but it's like the best vehicle on offer right now.
It's crazy. Here is Scott Pruitt. He was the Oklahoma, I think, head of the state EPA in Oklahoma, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
When Donald Trump appointed him to the federal EPA, his claim to fame when he was put into office, I should say on the federal level, was suing continuously the EPA so that he didn't have to follow environmental laws. That was what his job was. And so he was put there to deconstruct the administrative state, at least on the EPA level. Here he is with Newsmax's Rob Schmidt celebrating EPA versus West Virginia.
Rob, think about it. I mean, from a legislative perspective, if Congress doesn't deal with these big issues, they can continue to blame what? They can continue to blame the departments and agencies and administrative agencies that make these decisions, and never do the hard work of legislating.
Right.
And the court is really saying to Congress, you must do the job. You must pass the legislation, give the framework to the EPA, give the framework to all these administrative agencies. And you're right, this is much bigger than the EPA. This is across the bureaucracy, the deep state, the fourth branch of government, as we know, the career bureaucrats that exist in all these various agencies now have been sent a very clear message. You can't make it up. You know, the Clean Power Plan that the Obama administration passed, I led that effort along with other states to sue on that as I was Attorney General in the state of Oklahoma. Then when I went to the EPA, I repealed it. And then this particular matter is exactly what the court should have done. They sent the message to the administrative agencies. Look, you've got to only do that which you're empowered to do.
I like the fact that he's bragging about repealing a regulation because he had the power to do that. The point is the Clean Air Act was exactly what he said that they weren't legislating. It is a framework, and it's not just bureaucrats. It is scientists who are assessing what it is we need to achieve the goals set out by Congress. And I agree in many respects that Congress needs to own these things if they pass them, so that the population, civilian, citizens can say, oh, we like that or we don't like that. I mean, that's one of the good reasons. I think one of the best reasons to get rid of the filibuster, make the parties own their positions. The idea that these bureaucrats who are scientists and experts in the field don't have the right to take aren't empowered by Congress when Congress says we're passing the Clean Air Act, figure out a way to fight climate change, figure out a way to make our air breathable or safe for people, and they come up with a formula in which to do it, and they're not empowered to do so. I mean, Pruitt laid it all out there. They're going to do this with every agency. So it's not going to be, I want my candy safe for my kids. That's not going to be enough to charge the FDA with, let's say. It's going to have to be, Congress is going to have to come up with a formula. There can't be this much lead in it. There can't be this much. Maybe there's a new method of production of candy that Congress is not aware of, so they can't legislate as to what chemical can't be in candy. I mean, we're going to see this across the board.
And the information that's going to influence Congress to that degree is going to be heavily tilted towards the industries that might want to put lead in the candy, that might want to pollute, because these members of Congress are not experts. They are not scientists. That's why delegating to these agencies is so beneficial, because it's a little bit more insulated from lobbying power and corruption. Now, that's the precedent that they want to set, that they have a much more direct line to influencing these kinds of regulations in their favor to help corporate profits than they would if the EPA was able to make its own determinations on this. I mean,
they won't even need to lobby, because the EPA is not going to be able to do anything. In Congress, there's no way that Congress is going to get that is even capable of getting that micro on these things.
Well, and also because the Republican Party has been historically obstructionist, to use a Washington term, for decades at this point. They have hung their hat on it, Mitch McConnell in particular. So the idea that now Republicans are turning around and saying that the only way to get Congress has just got to legislate. Well, they've made it impossible for Congress to legislate for decades at this point, and that's obviously the purpose of this.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, word from our sponsors, and then we will bring Digby on to talk about this. Heather and I have seen this building for almost 2 decades now, and it's a little depressing. But that history is important, and as such, we've got a sponsored by a podcast by a a guest we've had on this program many times. It's been a while since we've had him on. But Dr. Eddie Glaude, there's always going to be something distinct about our present day, yet history haunts us. American democracy is at a crossroads. We have to decide who we really are as a nation. History is Us, an important 6-part documentary podcast series hosted by award-winning Princeton University professor Dr. Eddie Glaude, journeys back to face the truths about race at the heart of the American story. From the aftermath of the Civil War, the mid-20th century struggle for freedom, the election of Barack Obama, and the current-day racial reckoning, History is Us asks questions about who we are as a nation, what race might reveal about our current crisis, and where we go from here. Through the voices of distinguished historians and scholars, this limited series gives listeners the background and education to understand how we got here and how we can all use history to clarify the choices before us. Listen to History is Us, a presentation of Shining City Audio, C13 Originals, and Jon Meacham Studio. Available now wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also, one of our sponsors today, of course, Sunset Lake Sebede.com. Left is best. You get 20% off. And I don't know if there's been a week where I've needed it more, ladies and gentlemen. They have Sebede sour gummies. They have Sebede and melatonin sleep gummies.
Oh, I'm out of those, and it is really screwing me over.
And Emma's fishing for
I'm out of those. I am out of those.
Elderberry. Those are really great, actually. But also, I have really gotten into the flour and the buds and the keef and the pre-rolls. As a relaxant, I use the tincture to go to sleep at night. I give as a gift the fudge, and the coffee is great. It's my weekend brew. All of their products, and this is hugely important about Sebede. You don't know where you're getting this a lot of times. They have on their website third-party certification of every analysis of every product they sell, every batch that they harvest. Right now is the big harvest time. I think they're pulling the hemp in, or in the process of getting ready to start to harvest a bunch of that hemp. They're also movement partners. We've talked about this in the past. They've given tens of thousands of dollars to places like unions and to union strike funds and to food pantries and to innocence projects and to fight the drug war. Just a great bunch of guys. They use integrated pest management, so there's never any pesticide. They use all natural organic fertilizers. I mean, so check it out. You cannot do better. Sunset Lake Sebede.com. Left is best for 20% off. Longtime listeners of the show, Sunset Lake Sebede.com. Left is best. And don't forget, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can get the free show free of commercials and also get the fun half by becoming a member. Join the majorityReport.com. All right, I want to bring on Heather Parton.
A quick break, Sam.
Okay, we got to take a quick break, and we'll set this up, and we'll bring on Digby from the blog Hullabaloo. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Heather Parton, or as you may know her, Digby, from the blog Hullabaloo. Heather, also I should say columnist at salon.com. How are you?
You ask me that after this week? What do you think?
I was just saying that, this week was really, in many respects, the culmination of it. I mean, it's 6 years in the making, right? I mean, this was not, completely foretold at this time in 2016, but it was certainly predictable. We certainly had the ability to, that this was a real potential. I mean, in many respects, I would argue it has been this way for, 20 some odd years, maybe even in growing, really, maybe 50 years, or maybe 45 in terms of like where we led with Roe. But there was, I mean, if we had stopped to think about this 20 years ago or 40 years ago, it is not surprising that the Supreme Court that is going to overturn Roe v. Wade is also going to begin to unwind a lot of other things about our, now 21st century, or I should say 22nd century, 21st century way of life, essentially.
Oh, I think, going back to what you said at first there, it's been 6 years. I mean, I think we all remember the morning after the election of 2016, how we felt, that horrifying, empty feeling of dread and horror at what was awaiting us. And this was a huge part of that. This was, I mean, we all knew that Donald Trump was a clown and completely inept and unqualified for the job of president. And we were shocked and stunned that this could happen in our country, that someone like him could become president. But the ramifications of it were always, at least for me, and I think for an awful lot of people, what was going to happen with the court. We'd already seen what Mitch McConnell was capable of before the election. And the only thing that was saving us at that point was that we would have a Democratic president who would nominate, we figured Mitch couldn't hold out for 4 years. So he'd have to replace that seat, and then hopefully, maybe more with more liberal justices. And when that didn't happen, I think we all just felt this complete, sense that, as you say, the 45 or 50 years that were leading up to this, that we had finally reached the sort of culmination of the rights battle to dominate the court. But I have to say that even with that, the dread that I felt, the horror that I felt, this week kind of, it was worse than I imagined, to be honest with you. I felt that it was worse than I thought it was going to be. I had assumed that there would be at least still some desire on the part of these people to at least kind of cover their goals a little bit, and that they would at least try and maintain some sense that of respectability and legitimacy of the court. And it's clear now that they don't care. They don't care, and it's not just in the way in the results that they've gotten. It's in the opinions themselves. They're basically just telling everybody, "Hey, whatever. What are you going to do about it?" And I'm frankly pretty stunned, even though I was one of those people who took to my bed for a week after 2016, knowing that this was coming and understanding what we were going to probably be dealing with. Even as someone like that, I have been this week, frankly, shocked that everything coming from the guns decision to Roe, of course, which we knew, but even so, it's worse than I thought. And then these last two decisions, and then yesterday's agreement to take up the case, the independent state legislature's case next fall. I'm okay. All bets are off. The gloves are off. They're just going to do it, and they're saying, "What are you going to do about it?"
I think that's a good point about Roe, because I think that had I'm quite convinced that at the very least, prior to the Texas case, I guess, I would have said they're going to chip away at it. they're gonna chip away at it, and it'll be a 2 or 3 year process in which they chip away at Roe v. Wade, and they'll have but you're right. This is, I mean, on one level, like, we've said for a while, they are theocrats, and they are. I mean, they are zealots, and they are theocrats, and I mean this literally. And you don't really get humility that much with theocrats, right? I mean,
Right.
Roberts has always been a little bit cagey in the way that he unwinds these things. And everyone else on that court is to the right of Roberts, at least in not necessarily an agenda, but in that sort of like there is a worldview and a disposition towards other human beings by fundamentalists, the religious fundamentalists, and they're fundamentalists, to the extent that like Brett Kavanaugh is not a fundamentalist. He's just a go along to get along type of guy. They have God on their side, and so they can't go wrong.
Well, that's right. In fact, one of the best things that I saw on Twitter this week in regards to what you're saying is that there's all this talk about originalism and how we have to go back and look at the history and what the founders were thinking as they went to bed at night when they were putting together the Constitution. And one of the some Twitter wags said, "Yeah, here's what the founders were thinking. Wait, you're telling me that the majority on the court are Catholic?" I mean,
right.
It's kind of, I mean, that was not an originalist kind of thought at the time. Not that there's anything wrong with Catholics being on the court. I'm not suggesting that, but this is a very, very conservative Catholic majority, particularly the last justice that we just put on there. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett. I mean, she was literally part of kind of an extremist Catholic cult. I mean, and that's not an exaggeration, and I'm not trying to insult her. It's just the truth. I mean, this is where she comes from. So you're right. A lot of this comes from this, this very, very, right-wing fundamentalist theological position. And then you have this hardcore partisanship that's clearly just, I mean, and people like Clarence Thomas, who yesterday they quoted that he believes that the vaccines for COVID vaccines or derived from, aborted babies. I mean, this is a guy who's like on QAnon or something. I mean, that's how far he is. And we know about his wife, of course, who is also part of the right-wing, extremist faction. And, this is a really, really very, very difficult and very thorny problem. And I guess, here I am on your show again, talking about what do we do? And again, I'm kind of running up against the sense that nobody's going to do anything. And sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I thought you were down there. I didn't mean to cut you off, but the point that you make about Clarence Thomas, him saying this QAnon stuff and these not crazy conspiracy theories about aborted babies being in the vaccines. I mean, it's almost clarifying to people, hopefully, that they understand that these right-wing justices and all Republicans are really in the same boat of crazies, and it's not just the MAGA or the whatever Biden's trying to call it, ultra MAGA. But at the same time, the fact that Biden has basically ruled out impeachment for Clarence Thomas as this case is going to be taken up, the one that you mentioned at the start, the North Carolina case about elections for federal office and making a more politicized process and potentially taking the courts out of it. That could be grounds. We should start impeachment proceedings now, given the ties that Ginny Thomas has to these groups, because this could set the groundwork for something incredibly scary in 2024.
Oh, well, this case, and I actually wrote about it for Salon this morning. This case that they said they're going to take up next fall is truly, it is the greatest threat that we have to our democracy, I think, that's out there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the States. There's no doubt about it. They're putting in a bunch of cronies and henchmen into various election offices around the state, and there's every chance that there's going to be some manipulation and God only knows what with these Trumpist people in these positions. But this case, which is, I mean, this is an amazing thing because the story behind it is very interesting. It all goes back to Bush versus Gore. Surprise, surprise. William Rehnquist wrote an opinion in Bush versus Gore that was signed on to by both Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas. What a trio, right? And what he said in that was Rehnquist was trying to find some rationale for the federal government getting involved in what was really a state issue in Bush versus Gore. They were trying to determine the outcome of the election. And they had, the state Supreme Court down there had said, we're going to have a recount. We're going to recount all the votes in these disputed places, and they're going to be recounted by judges. I don't know if you remember that the recount that was going on when they stopped the count in Bush versus Gore was a bunch of guys in robes were counting the votes. This wasn't some people, peering at the chads. These were actual judges that they had called in to do the recount, right? Now, you would assume that any court would say, okay, these guys are legit. They're not going to cheat. We have faith in our judges to do that. Well, Bush versus Gore blew that out of the water. And one of the rationales they used to do that was to say that, well, state legislatures have the final word. That's this independent state legislature doctrine, which isn't a doctrine. It's just something that Rehnquist, pulled out of his back pocket on that day. Well, in any case, nobody took it seriously. That case was that case, right? It is what it is, and we all heard it. And John Paul Stevens wrote a dissent and he could specifically address that, said, what you're doing by overturning the state Supreme Court's ruling, and he didn't say it, but I've always assumed that he was also talking about the fact that, judges were doing the counting, so you should have some faith that they're going to do it right. That basically the court was saying that you're destroying all trust people have in the judiciary by doing this, by taking this, and you're saying that state courts can't be trusted. Well, that I had never thought about it again, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm no lawyer, certainly no constitutional scholar, but I've studied a lot about Bush versus Gore. It's a very important case. And I never thought about that part of it again until just before the 2020 election. Suddenly this thing is rearing its ugly head again. And Brett Kavanaugh refers to it in a case up in Wisconsin where it was one of those shadow docket cases. And it was about, late counting of ballots. The court rejected it, said it was too late and whatever. The full court did. But Kavanaugh wrote a weird footnote in that case saying, well, state legislatures really do have the final word. And a lot of people's ears perked up and went, whoa, what's going on here? Subsequent to that, a week later, Gorsuch, Thomas, and Alito signed on to another one in a Pennsylvania case, basically saying the same thing. So we all knew there were 4 justices suddenly who had revived this very obscure sort of concept of the independent state legislature doctrine, whatever that was. So that's been hovering out there through this whole time. Now, of course, we know after the election and when they went and did all these challenges all over the country, John Eastman, Giuliani, the rest of these guys, they were citing this. And that's what they were trying to do when they're calling up Georgia and saying, hey, can you find me the votes, right? This was in service of this idea that the state legislatures could call special sessions. And they had, plenary power to do whatever they want with elections. No other actor in state government has the power, not a state Supreme Court, not the governor. For instance, if the state legislature were to say, we're going to overturn the election and here's a law we're writing to make that happen, the governor would have no veto power under their normal constitution. The state constitutions would have no power. In other words, if a state has said the electoral count must reflect the majority will of the voter, that's in the state constitution, out the window. Federal law would supersede that, and the federal law, as these people see it, is that state legislatures are supreme, with only the Supreme Court of the United States having the final say should they want to do it. This is the craziest thing. It is an absolutely wild concept. that now the Supreme Court has taken up. And there are people who say, well, they should take it up since it's flying around out there and people are using it. Maybe they need to decide.
Huh.
I differ a little, especially after this week, because we know what they're going to do.
Yes, they're going to say that state legislatures have supremacy, that they cannot be constrained by state courts, that to the extent that they can be constrained by federal courts, it will end with the Supreme Court, which
Right.
we know if they decide this, they're going to rule in their favor. And the other important thing to understand too is Republicans control like what, 30 of these, maybe more, 30,
Yeah.
30 some odd of these state houses. And there it is. There's your minoritarian rule, and done. We're done. Because not only can they say, okay, we're not going to have, I mean, it's going to completely invalidate, right, the Voting Rights Act. It seems to me. I mean, if the state legislature has the ultimate authority, I don't understand how federal law could supersede it in any way. But on top of that, they have the ability to say like, oh, this year we're, on November 10th, we didn't like the outcome of the way that the voters voted for the electors. We're going to pass a law that says in, 2024, the state house will choose the electors. End of story.
Absolutely.
And then we don't have to send fake ones to DC. I should also just say this thing about Thomas, and I don't know how exactly he what exactly his belief is, but I think there are some COVID vaccines that do have some stem cell, fetal cell, in them in terms of the development, at least, of these, just like vaccines for chickenpox and hepatitis and shingles and rubella. And I don't know how many other vaccines have this. This is technology has been around for 60 years. So it's interesting that Thomas is just finding out about the COVID vaccine. That I think is more telling than the fact that I imagine when he got a Shingrix vaccine, he wasn't too worried about that. But yeah, this is lunacy, and the fervor in which, like, the train, once we hit 6, right, it was like all bets are off. It was just
Right.
like it is a runaway train. And that's what we're looking at. The only thing they're constrained by, it seems, is just, I don't know, how much work they're willing to do. And the bottom line is they're going to have decades in which to do this work. They're going to have decades. Just this year, when you think about all the things like the 6th Amendment, where you have a right to effective counsel, it has been severely undercut. The individual right for a person to get an abortion, gone. The ability of Congress to broadly give an objective to executive agencies to achieve in society, gone. The tribal sovereignty chipped away at the very least. I mean, this is just like in the past, 2 weeks. And it's fascinating. And on some level, it's mitigated by the case that they're taking up. But you wrote a piece this week about how Republicans are backing off. And we've been talking for the past couple of days about how the right is working overtime to pretend that the Roe v. Wade decision was meaningless. And it is fascinating how they know how unpopular their agenda is relative to the American public. And that's why they are smart enough to, here's the steak we're delivering, but we're also working on the plates, essentially, right? Like, we're also making sure that we're able to plate this meal for you. And that's what the case that they're picking up now, where they're basically just working on this minoritarian rule, and they're going to need it because, and we'll talk about the sort of the Democratic response in a moment, but this is an interesting, it's fascinating to see them run away from their long-held desire.
Absolutely. I mean, I was really stunned by that. And I did write a piece about it because I couldn't believe I went to and watched Fox News that, I do this for you people, just so that just to let you know what's going on over there. And it's not easy. Let me tell you, I have to drink heavily after I do this. It was astonishing to me because I would have expected they would do backflips, that this is their greatest achievement. This was their holy grail. And they were not doing backflips. They were saying, it's relax, ladies, it's okay. You're going to be able to get your abortions. You'll be able to get them. Don't worry. You just, if this is a state thing and nothing terrible is going to happen to you, everything's going to be fine. And I was really surprised that they took that tack. But the thing that really did it for me was when I read about Donald Trump being extremely upset about, I shouldn't say extremely upset, worried about it, because he thinks that, he knows he's got a problem with women and he's looking at 2024 and saying, wow, this is really going to hurt me. It took them 2 days to persuade him to go out and take a victory lap. Now, which he did. He came out, look, it's the greatest decision in the history of mankind. But it took him a couple of days to do that, which with Donald Trump, right? I mean, he takes victory laps over the sun coming up in the morning. The fact that it took him any time at all to go do that was very telling, and it ended up. And I think he's right. I mean, to the extent he has political instincts, he has his political instincts are toward his own self-preservation, and I think that he understood very clearly that this is the kind of thing that could shift the dynamic that everybody thought was there, and I actually think it has. In fact, there's a poll that came out this morning. I think it's the AP poll that shows not just abortion, not just Roe and the reversal of Roe, but women's rights in general, suddenly taking on huge new salience, particularly among women, but also among men. That suddenly people are waking up and going, wow, this stuff is really in the crosshairs now. And I think there's absolutely no doubt that gay rights, LGBT rights are also on the agenda. This is definitely happening. There was a debate, I think it was last night in Michigan, one of the governor's races, where they asked people, should they reverse, Obergefell and, and Lawrence. And they're all going, yeah, we need to revisit those. I mean, those governor candidates, Republican governor candidates, are all saying, yeah, we need to do it. So this is definitely on the menu. And, again, it will be another thing that they'll do exactly like we just discussed with Roe. The court will take it up. They'll do whatever. These are going to work their way through the courts over the next couple of years. And then the rest of them will go, oh, don't worry, gay people. Don't worry, don't worry, LGBT kids. It'll be fine, because they're going to try and paper it over around elections. But make no mistake, anybody, that this is not real and that they're not actually doing this. And I wouldn't have bet on it, to be honest with you. I was afraid of it. I knew that it was a possibility, but I wouldn't have bet that they would go here. But now I'm totally convinced that they will. After watching what they did this term, these decisions that came down in the last couple of weeks, absolutely convinced me that they're going to go for it. They're going to do whatever it takes, and there's no stopping them.
There is no, to use the court's term, limiting principle on
Right.
on what they're going to do. I mean, the one limiting principle was that there have been jurists in the past, and I think Roberts is like this, where they're acutely aware of the role they play in society, and they want to basically, slowly boil the frog. The five that are controlling the court now, this is microwave type of stuff that they're working on. And we should say here is, and what's also, but just get back to the point of, and you cited that poll where there has been a real increase in the importance of abortion rights and women's rights in the minds of voters in terms of the polling that's just come out in the wake of the Roe reversal. I want to put up this tweet. It is from I believe they're a New York State OBGYN retweeting a colleague in Missouri who I believe is a lawyer for a hospital. Put this tweet up. This is number 6, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this, Heather, but it says that essentially. I don't have it, put it up here. It is OBGYN colleague in Missouri, quote, "We are now observing patients with ectopic pregnancy and hemopentatorium until they have a documented failing hemoglobin or unstable vital signs." In other words, there are 43,000 ectopic pregnancies, more or less, a year. And this is where, one of those things that puts a woman's, or I should say a person who's pregnant, life in danger. And instead of performing an abortion on these people in that moment, they are waiting until they are well on to dying before they intervene, which is going to mean, and this is something we've been talking about the past week, because, this is the lawyer of the hospital now, because they're advising their doctors. We need to go in, and it needs to be a slam dunk that a person is dying, that their life is in danger. And how do you get there, right? Like, this is the way you think about it. It's like, is a kid, a 5-year-old's life in danger when they're 20 feet from a cliff that has no fence? Are they in danger and there's nobody within 20 feet of them? Is their life in danger? Is their life in danger when they're 10 feet from that cliff? Is their life in danger when they're 2 feet from that cliff? Is their life in danger only when they're falling off that cliff? And the person who we're relying on to save that in this scenario could be facing 10 years in jail, could be facing loss of license. So if that kid's 20 feet from the cliff, well, I don't know. If they're 10 feet, I'm not sure which way are they facing. If they're 5 feet, I don't know how a court is going to decide that person's life is in danger. And we now are starting to see evidence of it. And what we're going to see over the next probably 3 or 4 weeks, if we haven't already, is women dying, as people who are pregnant dying because of these bans that are, I don't think all 13 are in place from the trigger. I think a couple got held up, but we're going to start seeing this. And we're going to see people who, I don't know if it's, I'm not going to report anything that's like, maybe apocryphal on Facebook, but you can start to see indications of scenarios like this. And it seems to me that reporting is going to do part of the work to make people understand just exactly what's going on here, because it's still, I think people don't really know. But the other thing that is key is that Democratic leadership has to be out there and acting as if, and we have talked about this so many times, Heather, where it's like, both of us were in the film business. It's the reaction shot. You need to show, we were talking about this in the context of impeachment. You need to show, if something is horrible, we need to see it on your face. We need to see it on the faces of everybody around it. And when the Democratic leadership supports somebody who is anti-abortion in Texas, or when Joe Biden makes a deal with Mitch McConnell, and the deal may in and of itself be a good deal, I don't know, makes a deal to put an anti-abortion judge on the federal bench, we're not seeing it on their faces. When, Clyburn comes out and says, well, we've been expecting this, we're not seeing it on their faces. And
I'll add, while Sam's frozen, I will add Clyburn and the rest of Democratic leadership undercut themselves by campaigning for a anti-abortion Democrat in Texas, in Henry Cuellar versus Jessica Cisneros. I mean, we played yesterday on the program when Sam was off the clip of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez basically explaining how the Supreme Court needs to be kept in check by the other two branches, which is using institutionalism to your benefit, right? And it's true, everything she's saying. But everything that she's communicated has been, so many steps above what the Biden administration has communicated in terms of action plans. And I don't understand how you can say mobilize and go to the polls to fight Republicans when you're not willing to fight Republicans yourself.
Well, it's absolutely true. And I agree with you about AOC. I think her responses have been really quite brilliant. She was on Stephen Colbert this week, which I wish she'd do more of that kind of popular, not sort of non-political stuff, because she's really, really good at sort of explaining things like this, political issues like this, in ways that I think people who don't follow politics can understand. She was great on there, and she has a lot of clarity. And also, it's sure, she's throwing out a lot of things, but she's saying, look, there are steps we could take. Maybe some are too extreme or impossible for some reason, due to whatever. But you have to at least be thinking along these terms. She's conveying the urgency of the moment. And I just want to say one thing. Part of the urgency of this is what Sam, you were saying earlier, which was about doctors being afraid now and being, really concerned that they're going to be. It's not just that the law is going to come after them. We have a vigilante culture that's growing up in this country, and it's always been there with abortion. They've been, there's been a terrorist movement for the last 50 years that has, particularly the last 40 years, that has gone after doctors who perform abortions. They've basically scared most doctors out of the field of even, performing abortions. But now, because it's become so acute, this idea that they've gone so extreme on abortion to the point where, no exceptions. In case of rape or incest, or having these draconian kind of approaches to it, where doctors are afraid that if they don't wait until a woman's vital signs are failing, that they can't save her, that they are now afraid of this vigilante culture. In Texas, they actually institutionalized it. So that's also a specter that's hanging over all this. And it's one of the things that I think ties in, this issue with everything else that's going on. And if the Democrats have to, I don't know, they do what they want, but my feeling is that it's necessary for them to do exactly what you just said, Emma, is to be out there and to be conveying the urgency of what's going on, and not just kind of going, well, we got to be practical here, and so we need this seat down in Texas. I mean, the idea that or this judge in Kentucky, which I do not understand this at all, and I don't. But anybody who would trust Mitch McConnell when it comes to the courts, I don't know how that can possibly be, that Biden extracted anything from him for doing that. And in fact, the governor of Kentucky says this is an absolutely horrifying choice, that McConnell couldn't get that judge appointed during Trump. So what in the hell is happening now that he can get him under Biden? So that, that's something to keep your eye on. But, across the board, what we're dealing with here is what it appears to be from the Democratic Institutional Party is paralysis. That's what it looks like to me. As I'm watching it, I just don't see a sense. I mean, they come out and go, well, you got to vote in November. They're not saying why. They're not saying what that means. How does that translate into change? And in that AP poll I quoted earlier, there were a lot of people that were quoted in there kind of going, gee, I just feel so helpless. I don't know what to do. They have to give people a sense that there is something to be done here. And yes, it is extreme. It has to be. We're dealing with an extreme, party, an extreme Supreme Court. If the Democrats don't meet that moment, then they will prevail. There is nothing to be done. So they need to say things. Now, I mean, we talked about this, I think, maybe a couple months ago, that it's not enough to just throw out, codify Roe and put it on the floor and have all the Republicans vote against it and have all the Democrats vote for it. And gee, too bad, we need 2 more senators. That does not convey the urgency of what is happening. What would convey the urgency, if you want to put, votes on the floor, put up individual issues involved with that. Are you going to vote for an exception for rape and incest? Are you going to vote for, for allowing women to cross state lines? What that does is put Republicans on the spot in their home, in their home districts and in their states, with all these crazy people, with the Trump base who is demanding all these extreme policies, they will have to defend whether or not if they say no, rape or incest, we do believe in an exception. They have to defend that to their base. If they say they don't believe in an exception, then they're going to have to defend that to the broader public wherever they're running. You have to. It's no longer useful to just say I'm pro-life. Oh well, I'm pro-choice. Those are not useful things. Roe is gone. We can't. That's not there for us to say, gee, if we believe in a constitutional right to choose, because we don't have it anymore. So now you've got to go in and you've got to get to the heart of this issue and explain how extreme these people are and how ridiculous it is for people in state houses or, a bunch of men in black robes to be making these kinds of very, very difficult and intimate decisions. They got to get back to square one and start doing that sort of thing. I see very little appetite for that. And in fact, they are champing at the bit. I can feel it, to get back to those kitchen table issues, because they don't want to talk about this stuff. They don't want to talk about Roe. They don't want to talk. I mean, we haven't talked about guns, what they just did in the wake of one of the worst mass shootings in American history. What did they, what the court just, released, let's unleash more guns on the streets of America. They just did, in that latest ruling with concealed carry from New York. That these are issues, and like Josh Hawley was on Fox News this week, and he said, or I guess it was just last night, and he said people don't care about these things. People don't care about abortion. They don't care about guns. They don't care about January 6th. Really? Okay, well, let's test that.
Clip. We have that clip, actually. This is Josh Hawley on with Sean Hannity, and again, this is consistent with the right, I think, sort of feeling concerned that there's an opportunity here for Democrats, because none of the things that have happened with the Supreme Court are even remotely popular, and they're going to get worse. I mean, because people are going to die. Here's Josh Hawley on Sean Hannity.
Reince's question: will their strategy of running on January 6th, Roe v. Wade being overturned, the Second Amendment, is that going to be successful in any way to gin up their base, motivate their base?
No, because they're talking about issues that only they care about, that nobody else cares about, that doesn't affect the lives of real people, or that they're wrong on. I mean, take abortion again. What are you going to say to people? No, you shouldn't have a choice in what your laws are in your own state. That's what they're telling people. January 6th. The only people who care about January 6th are the Democrats in Washington, D.C. These are.
I mean, this is, objectively, we can look at the polls and we see that's not the case, right? I mean, objectively, we can look at that. Democrats, I mean, they are clearly afraid of these issues moving to the fore. And so it would be, and with good reason. And so you'd think it would be obvious for Democrats to be pushing this stuff. Like Joe Biden, I don't know if he is authorized to have, to provide abortions or to provide space in federal buildings in specific states as an abortion provider. But as soon as this story about Missouri comes out of Missouri Hospital, I would go on television and say, we have seen these stories. We are setting up clinics for doctors who fear that the lives of women are in danger, but are afraid to perform a necessary abortion, not an elective abortion. We're giving them a space to do that so that they can do this without being afraid of being, convicted under the Mississippi abortion ban. Why would you not do that? You know what? Why wouldn't you force that conversation to be a national conversation at that point? Because 60-70% of the country is going to be like, well, of course they should be allowed to do this. Well, I got bad news for you. They're not. This is a conversation that needs to happen. While we're here, because we were also, talking the Supreme Court, the decision to pick up this case about the electors coming out of the state. We haven't touched on January 6th. And this week, the hearing with Mark Meadows, lieutenant, essentially, was, I think we need to see the sort of the other side of this, but it was connective tissue between two, real sort of strands of this, which is what they were doing in the White House and what was happening outside the White House with the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. And in this week, that connective tissue was basically, at least we saw like sort of almost like the MRI of it. We haven't seen it in person, but we've seen the MRI of it, and largely in part because this Hutchinson, she changed lawyers and was no longer with a lawyer being paid by Donald Trump. And so she decided to testify publicly. You wrote about this. It's interesting. They're doing the same thing with her testimonies. They're sort of doing with the Roe decision. They're basically saying like, nothing to see here. Here's one tiny, talk about that a little.
Right. She's just a little coffee girl, it was no biggie. And basically, she couldn't have possibly seen what she said she saw, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Well, yeah, I think what you just mentioned, this connective tissue, I think that this was the first glimpse that we've had of how they're bringing this entire coup plot and the various strands of it, which Liz Cheney, in her opening statement in the original primetime hearing, indicated, that the plot was, there were several different strands of it, and but they were all leading to the same thing. And it was as if they had, they tried this, and then they tried this, and they tried this. They had all these legal, attempts to, quasi-legal attempts to try and deal with this thing through the court. And then finally, the last-ditch effort, if you will, of January 6th, we did not know whether or not the White House was directly involved in that. And we still don't know. But what we did find out was that Trump and Meadows, and probably a number of others, were completely unsurprised by the fact that there was violence at the Capitol that day. They didn't. I mean, Mark Meadows kept doom scrolling when he goes, "Yeah, well, thanks for letting me know." When they came in and told him there were armed, rioters in the crowd, Donald Trump said, bring them in, get rid of the metal detectors. I want all these armed people in my crowd, which I'm now going to send up to the Capitol. We found that neither of them were surprised by events that were happening that day. Now, maybe they just were tired. Perhaps they just didn't have a reaction for other reasons. But it stands to reason that they did know. And I've mentioned this on here before. One of the comments that has really struck me from the moment I read it was in the Woodward and Costa book on the night of January 5th, that Trump was once more trying to pressure Mike Pence to do what he did. And Pence said, "I don't have the authority to do it." And Trump was standing at the window, opened the door, and it was cold air coming in. This was very, very vibrant, detailed description of the room in the Oval Office. And there was a crowd outside because they were having rallies the night before, including the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. And they were coming in, and they could hear him cheering out there in the street. And Trump turned to Pence when he said, "I don't have the authority." And he said, "What if these people say you do? Wouldn't that be cool?" I mean, I guess you can say he was just talking off the top of his head, but to me, it sounded from the moment I read it that he had at least some knowledge of the fact that that there were plans afoot to use the crowd to pressure Pence to do what he wanted him to do. And these meetings that were being held at the Willard Hotel, the war room with Steve Bannon. I mean, it's hard to believe that this group of misfits could have been, heading up this coup plot. But when you look at what happened, you can sort of see it that, maybe that's all it takes is a crew of misfits to pull something like that off. And Meadows was going to go over there. According to Cassidy Hutchinson, he said, "I got to go to a meeting over at the Willard." And she somehow talked him out of doing it and said, "Why don't you just call in?" which he did. Why was Mark Meadows calling into the Willard Hotel? Why Donald Trump told him to call Roger Stone and Mike Flynn both of whom were heavily involved with the Proud Boys. Mike Flynn was very involved with with the coup plotters at the Willard. All of that is starting to lead to this idea that, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys are the only people in this whole thing who've been charged with seditious conspiracy. You don't have to be present at the riot to be charged. In fact, one of the leaders of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, has been charged with seditious conspiracy. He wasn't there. So, this is I think where we're leading, and there are going to be new hearings coming up after the after the break here. And those are going to be led, I think, by Jamie Raskin, who is doing the January 6th, insurrection hearings. And I just have a suspicion that we're going to see more of that connective tissue fleshed out. And the MRI is looking a little vague right now,
Right.
but I think it's going to become more clear as we look at the new hearings.
There's been a lot. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Good.
No, just the whole thing reeks of Roger Stone in terms of
Absolutely.
like the kinds of dirty tricks that he likes to foment, and the fact that Stone was having conversations with people in the White House. It seems abundantly clear that at the very least there was a baseline of understanding, and that the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were feeling their oats, right? Like, yeah, we're working with the White House here. We're this paramilitary, these two paramilitary groups, which explains their recon efforts in order to map things out. I mean, all of this is they're doing a good job of painting a really good picture of this. And the only thing right-wing media wants to focus on is the ketchup on the walls, and they're pretending
Right.
that none of the other the web that's being spun and being communicated, they're just pretending they don't see it.
Right, and the same too, I would say, with the car story. And I actually
Right.
believe the car story was real, and I think it backfills what Trump thought he was doing, but that I don't think is the meaningful stuff. Like when Cipollone says to Hutchinson 4 or 5 days, like on January 2nd, we got to be careful or we're going to get charged here.
Yeah.
That's why they want him to come and testify, because how does a lawyer 4 days from what we're led to believe just a rally that we don't know if there's going to be any, how are they worried 4 days out about getting prosecuted for, essentially whatever it is, defrauding the country? I mean, they were aware, there were certain people in that White House who were aware of the conversations that were happening, because they could almost like overhear it. The Giuliani bringing up the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys in that hallway or down why is that name? Why are those? What is the explanation that those words are being uttered in the White House, except for I'm working with, or we need more security because we're aware of, but they didn't have more security. I mean, there's a reason why those names are being thrown around in there. And so let me ask you this, like where does this lead? Because at the same time, we also have Joe Biden out there, and they did a focus test, 6 months of like consultant class, just BS. And they've come up with, what is it? Uber MAGA, Ultra MAGA.
Ultra MAGA.
I mean, this is insanity. Like, first off, how do people vote against Ultra MAGA? Like, who's
Right.
got behind their, in parens behind their name? Like, who? This is here it is. Folks, let's get this one thing straight. The Ultra MAGA agenda has always been taking away women's rights in every single state. I don't know who Ultra MAGA is, but it also happens to have been the Republicans' agenda.
And
Like,
also,
even Liz Cheney, even the blessed Liz Cheney, who,
Yep.
willing to, throw her sister under the bus when it comes to gay marriage, and willing to, chastise people when it comes to torture, and I mean, on and on. Even the blessed one, she also has been promoting take away a woman's right to choose. And so
Absolutely.
this is just insanity. It really is. I mean, you could, I think there's an argument that there are certain Democrats who are there to protect corporate rights from the Democratic Party, but they're like, what could possibly explain ultra MAGA other than sheer incompetence?
Well, I think that's what it is. And this obviously apparently they'd done these focus groups where they found that, people really, the idea that there's Republicans and then there's MAGA and then there's ultra MAGA. And you want to make somebody be afraid to be ultra MAGA or afraid to vote for ultra MAGA.
It's like different Pokemon levels,
exactly.
Right?
Like,
the evolutionary processes.
Well, I mean, is there a good MAGA? Is that like the ultra MAGA is the bad one and the regular MAGA is the good MAGA and the Republicans, they're just great? I mean, I don't know, but we do hear a lot about this thing. We want a strong Republican Party. We need to have a strong Republican Party like we used to have. I'm going, no, not really, because that's what got us here in the first place. Besides which, telling Democrats they need to work for Republicans just seems to me to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard, just generally speaking, much less right now. But you're right. Look, it's Republicans. And if what you're trying to do is tell people, trying to make them, make people vote against these extreme views that are coming out of the right now, that are coming out, you make them vote against Republicans. Make being a Republican a shameful thing. Absolutely. Tell people, look, this is what your part, and I mean, obviously what they're trying to do, they're trying to coax over a few, swing suburban moms or whatever that vote Republican. And they think, we don't want to insult them by saying the Republicans are bad. So we'll just say it's these other people, the ultra MAGAs. But the truth is they should be told that being a Republican is bad. There should be. I mean, if you're a person who has a conscience, you're pro-choice, you care about little kids being gunned down in schools, you care about the democracy being, attempted coups and the democracy being overthrown, you should not be a Republican, because that is what these people are. That is who they are. That's what they're doing. And the Democrats what is so hard about that? I honestly don't understand it. I don't get it.
Even if they think that they're going to offend the sensibilities, then what you do is you say ultra MAGA Republicans. Like you
at least put that in there. You're right. At least put Republican in there.
They're not some like weird third party from like an alien country that is invaded. It's no, they have grown out of the Republican Party. Even if I accept that premise, I'll tell you something that I've said this in the past many times too. My experience at Air America was seeing the consultant class come in. And it is done because people think that they just don't have, they have no answers. And the person with the shiniest watch comes in, and the assumption is they have that shiny watch because they know what they're talking about, as opposed to they have the best presentation and can really snow people who don't have a clue as to what they're doing. And right. That's what I mean. This ultra MAGA thing, it is honestly, it's as if like, some of the people in this leadership haven't been outside, and if there's a deal with Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden, and Joe Biden somehow is going to get accelerated judges because of putting this abortion, anti-abortion judge, who's a lunatic, incidentally. I mean, he's not just, run of the mill anti-abortion. He is a lunatic. Some of the stuff that he has ruled on in the past. Where was Chuck Schumer? When Chuck Schumer was in the minority, like where was the deal that he could strike with Donald Trump to get, I don't know, a socialist on the bench, on the federal bench? Like I don't know why it is that the Republicans seem to have these special powers, but it's fascinating and incredibly depressing. And one hopes that maybe some of the Democrats will get the message. I mean, AOC has been the only one, like you said earlier, who has been, who has like a platform and has been articulating the urgency of the moment.
Right. And she says something that to me is just really explained. She says, we have a crisis of legitimacy. I mean, to me, that is, and then she goes on to explain what that means. We have a crisis of legitimacy. Our institutions are failing. You've got, that they've been taken over by extremists. And across the board, they are, threatening our democracy, threatening our rights, threatening our freedoms. And here's how they're doing it. I mean, it isn't that hard to do that. I mean, she seems to me to be, I mean, these aren't prepared speeches. She's just saying this off the cuff on Stephen Colbert. I mean, it's not like, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's that hard to do that. But very few people are speaking clearly on this, and there are some. I mean, I think Elizabeth Warren has been passionate on these issues since it happened. There have been others too. You'll see somebody come on TV, Brian Schatz of the senator from Hawaii. He's very good as well on social media. There are some who are just out there saying, hey, look, wake up, and that's essentially what it is wake up. This thing is happening. It's real. This isn't hyperbole. This is actually happening. Look at what the court just did. Look, that's all you need to know. That was Mitch McConnell's plan. He fulfilled his plan, and he's not done yet. And and here's some things that we have to do now. We've got to start getting serious about this. But this somnambulent approach on the part of the White House, and kind of, maybe we'll do the filibuster for abortion. We might do that because maybe that's a good idea, and maybe voting rights or something like that. No, the filibuster, well, it should have been gone a year ago. But, the fact is that is something they can run on this fall. Just go, we have to have 2 more senators. We have to have it because if we don't, everything is going to go. We have to have 2 more senators. We've got to get rid of the filibuster. So, this is the kind of thing I think that they just don't, like I said at the beginning, I feel like there's a sense of paralysis among the Democratic leadership. And I honestly, I just want to be like Cher in Moonstruck and slap them across the face and go, snap out of it. They've got to, this idea that you can just sort of let things unfold and hope that people, at some point sort of recognize that threat that's coming from the right, and they'll get out and vote and gosh, do it. Well, by the way, if this case that the Supreme Court decided to take up next term, by the time 2024 comes along, it won't matter how many people have voted.
Right.
Swing states, they could have a huge turnout among Democrats. They could win by, hundreds of thousands of votes, and it won't make a difference because the state legislatures can decide that there was the count was tainted somehow and overturn it. So, this is pretty urgent. It's pretty urgent, and it's tremendously depressing, I have to admit. I mean, I'm a little shaken by what I saw this week.
Heather Parton, Digby, as always. Well, I can't even say a pleasure. I mean, it's always a pleasure.
Catharsis.
Huh?
Catharsis.
It's been a rough couple of years. Well, but thank you. Appreciate the insight.
I was going to say my pleasure, but I'll just say you're welcome instead.
Yes, we'll see you soon. Thanks, Heather.
Okay, thanks. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too.
All right, folks. Depressing week, and it's again. This is it was foretold. I mean, we knew it was coming, not necessarily exactly in this form. We thought maybe there might be a chance that it, things would have been a little bit different, but here we are. And speaking of which, there we go. We're going to head to the fun half. You can be part of the program. IM us. Pick up the app at majorityapp.com. You can IM the show. Also, we may take calls. Maybe not. I'm not sure. 646-257-3920. We will see. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. Get 10% off. It's all fair trade. Great company. Great coffee. Can't go wrong. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe? You're flying the COVID solo train.
Yeah, although David and I will have an interview for patrons this evening with Lee Phillips talking about his book on actually against degrowth and criticizing even people like Naomi Klein for degrowth ideas. So it's a bit more contentious climate change thing, I guess, maybe to distract from people. But Lee's got a lot of spicy opinions about certain, I guess, NGO ways of doing climate change that I think people are going to be intrigued by. So patreon.com just left reckoning to hear that.
Interesting. All right, folks. See you in the fun half. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's.
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello? Is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-3501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
654 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes with satire.
On top of it all,
Yeah.
my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the fun half of the Majority Report. It is Friday, folks. Wrapping up a rough week. To be honest, the sport report on IM says, calling it now, Pritzker 2024. Seriously. No, he's not a leftist dream, but he's actually carried out what he ran on and has done some good in Illinois. I mean, they're going to be fishing around, I have a feeling.
Yeah,
Democrat.
actually, Chapo had an interesting pro-Pritzker take recently that, which was interesting. People might want to check out. That might have been on the Patreon episode, but yeah, I'd buy that.
I mean, has Biden said anything about his decision?
Biden said that he's running. I mean, but of course he's going to. And go ahead.
Sorry, Sam. I was just saying that this Times piece came out that he was kind of like bristling at like the amount of skepticism about him running again. And speaking of Pritzker's made a few like presidential stops. Like he went to New Hampshire, and apparently Pritzker's press people before he went preemptively reached out to Biden's people and were like, "Don't worry, he's not going to primary you." So
Yeah.
they're which they appreciated, but they're definitely, I think, a little twitchy about people not being like, oh, Biden's definitely running in 24.
They should.
Oh,
I
and I
mean-
would say Pritzker's people reaching out to Biden saying we're definitely not going to primary you is tantamount to their announcement that they're going to primary.
Yeah.
I mean, but I would say that, look, the bet that everybody's making right now, and understand this is the way that this develops, and I've seen people make the decision to run for something, and usually they make the decision, and short of like, you know, a nuclear bomb, they're going to figure out a way in which all the pieces are going to fall together in a way that signals to them they should run. Right now, they're all setting themselves up for Biden to not run on his own. They're not necessarily, they're also hedging their bets with a potential for a primary. But I think, like, you know, it would be malpractice not to go out there and lay the groundwork, assuming that Biden is not going to run. And I don't know, people like we commented on this earlier in the week. They sent Kamala Harris out there with big nothing burger in terms of responding to what are you doing with abortion. And then they sort of like undercut her a little bit, like a day or two later when they're like talking about the filibuster or this and that. That's a tough position to put somebody into, like being like, let's put you out there. You'll be the test balloon. And if you come back completely deflated, then we know. But it's not necessarily protecting her on some level. I wonder if it's their way of like keeping her, you know,
Well, they're either keeping her sidelined or they're putting her in tough positions, and she has not yet risen to the occasion. Like, that's another layer of frustration I have with this administration is if, you know, Biden ran on, I'm just here to even the scales, correct the damage that Donald Trump did. It would have been nice if he picked somebody who wasn't completely built in a lab by Democratic donors and has zero appeal to regular people and has difficulty communicating issues on a very basic level, has no talent on the stump. Like, it might have been a better idea to put someone in. Anybody else that he was considering, I feel like would have been an improvement over this. Especially if Biden doesn't have the ability to communicate in the way that he once did, which is the truth, frankly. Like, it would have been helpful for there to be another member of the administration to be there, except what I hear, and Matt's heard this too from people who don't cover politics, is where's Kamala? Where's Kamala? Where's Biden? They're invisible to folks.
well, if I'm the Biden people, I also don't necessarily want, at this point, people like an obvious slam dunk, people going like, the vice president should be running in 2024. And if I, you know, like, I mean, because.
But they don't even have that option because she's not good enough for that.
Well,
like, she does not have
but-
the talent to, I mean, they don't understand that. But
yeah, no, but I'm saying that sending her out there to answer questions, she's not freelancing. She's not in a position to come up with answers in that moment that haven't been discussed. I mean, people should understand that. I mean, maybe
No, I know.
maybe there are better ways for her to respond to that, but she's going out there and she's been told, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing that. We're not doing this. And she's going out there with nothing. But that's her job because they're making it her job. And all I'm suggesting is that if I'm the Biden White House, I don't want a super popular vice president right now who's out there showing how competent she is, because that's going to raise the temperature on people saying don't run. And so I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but that's probably what they're doing. Like,
I think they also see her as a liability. I think they see somewhat of, there's some weird stuff about who's running the show with her sister, all that. I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily know if there's.
Let me put it this way.
They're in love with her.
She does not sit down. She does not get to choose that she's going to sit down for those interviews without it coming out that she wasn't authorized to do that. And so if she's in that situation, I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, you know, and I think your criticism of her is, you know, is warranted, but they could also be exacerbating the situation, if you know what I mean. Come shower with Crowder. Hey, Sam, could you elaborate on what that threesome with H. John Benjamin was like? He didn't name you in his book, but we all are 99% sure you're the third person.
You said it wasn't you, right?
Can you be honest with us, please? Love you.
Yeah.
I will be totally honest. I remember when that happened in real time. I think I got a phone call in between it. I know who that third person was. They are not a public person per se. I'm not necessarily a fan of that person, to be honest with you, either. I saw him like 8 years ago, maybe at a reunion. And what he told me he was doing, I was shocked. It was basically like technology that they were selling overseas to essentially, to horrible regimes to spy on people or something. I'm like, oh, that is gross. It was just like, are you joking? Like, I almost said that. I think I said that to him. Like, seriously? That's horrible. But it was that dude. And so it was not me. It was not me. I mean, honestly, like I've seen what John Benjamin looks like just with his shirt off, and there's no way I would ever engage in anything with him. Like, I think it's no way. All right, I'm going to turn the phones on. Here is the phone number, 646-257-3920 is the number. Let's get to let's play this Liz Cheney thing. Look, I'm going to preface this by saying that I think I could come up with reasons why Liz Cheney should be like literally locked up. I am happy to use somebody effectively, and I think she's being used effectively in these January 6th hearings. But I do not think that she is a hero. I think she is a tool that we're using properly. But
a tool that's a Republican, and they're much better at going on the attack in these kinds of settings.
Depressing thing too.
But that's why she's useful for these Jan 6 hearings, because she understands how to attack.
It's true.
Nice.
Absolutely true. But remember, this is somebody who attacked people who were criticizing torture. This is somebody who threw her sister under the bus, came out against gay marriage because, and despite the fact that her sister was trying, I think, or had a relationship at the time, and then apologized later when she realized, like, oh, my aspirations have been met, or society has changed. I mean, I think she's really not a good person. So for the rest of the Republican field in a congressional race to make her look like she's almost human is stunning. Look at this clips assembled. These are the 4 people that she's running against, or 3 people she's running against in the congressional primary in Wyoming. And I think she very smartly, I would imagine that she's behind funding some of them because they're going to split the vote amongst the lunatics. But this is the Republican Party in Wyoming, and writ large, it is the Republican Party, except for Liz Cheney, don't exist in other places.
We're going to go to what we call a lightning round.
January 6th
was a setup from the beginning. We cannot have actual, anyway.
What we saw happen on January 6th was clearly an attempt to delay the count of the electoral votes.
Coronavirus vaccine policy.
They knew Fauci had awards for his work in cytokines.
Mr. Fauci is one of the most corrupt individuals in Washington, D.C.
We are to oppose any vaccines.
Everybody ought to get vaccinated, and we need to do everything we can to protect ourselves from future viruses.
Wyoming residents' faith in the election process.
I understand when I talked to Mike Lindell, he did say that there was a small portion of voter fraud in this state, but that is alarming.
What about Facebook using the system to steer people? We know for a fact all the major internets do that.
The 2000 Mules movie is something that I think we have great concern about.
Voting machines that, are suspected fraud.
There are politicians in this country, beginning with Donald Trump, who have lied to the American people. He consistently has said that the election was stolen when it wasn't.
Ukraine is corrupt. We started it. We got involved. We pushed them into being against the Russian government.
Money laundering. I think that's the biggest ticket for Ukraine's and the Biden administration.
It's the front line in the battle for freedom. And I think we've got to elect serious leaders.
All of the internets.
That was my favorite. Was Mike Lindell has said there's only a little bit in Wyoming, so I think we're safe.
When I talked to Mike Lindell,
from a one-on-one conversation they had
when we had our weekly catch-up call.
I also spoke to the guy who did the wearable blanket, and he said
the snuggie,
and he said, yeah, no, there was only moderate election fraud.
The Ukraine question is also revealing, because I do think it shows a genuine split on foreign policy in the Republican Party between base and establishment. But it's also like you see them elaborate why they, for instance, wouldn't support money to Ukraine, and it's like corruption and like the old-fashioned
Hunter Biden.
It's not anti-imperialism.
No,
well, absolutely not. And it's not even like, I think the corruption they're talking about, because Ukraine has had a serious problem with a corrupt government. I mean, in terms of like, graft and all of that. In fact, that was, a big push by the Europeans and the Obama administration. But the corruption they're talking about is all Hunter Biden stuff. It's all Hunter Biden. And to be fair, also, like, the front line of freedom, I just find is like, it's not. It is, we're helping people who have been invaded, and obviously trying to, undercut Russia's strength. And frankly, there has to be a limiting principle on that as well. But I don't know. I just saw a poll, and I don't know how accurate it is. Something like 80% of Ukrainians have no desire to cede any of their territory. That shouldn't be terribly shocking. I can only imagine. What do you think the polling would be in this country if we were being invaded? Is to like
by Mexico?
I'll let them get Florida.
Well,
yeah, we got to give them back we got to give them back New Mexico and Arizona. What's their position?
I mean, let's be honest, folks. It's New Mexico. These people, they have
pretty
more,
good.
Los Angeles. I mean, come on.
Come on. They are culturally aligned.
What is Las Vegas? I mean, that's not English, folks.
Oh,
we've got to give it back. They're more aligned.
Sounds scary.
Yeah, you can imagine Americans doing that. Would you say what would be the polling of American wanting to give up territory, cede territory for peace? Would you put it around like 1% of Americans would suggest that we would do that?
Probably, yeah. It is cool, or not cool, but it is, I don't know why that adjective just came out of my mouth, but it is interesting to see her stand her ground on the election fraud, or on the election big lie thing too. I mean, that's her whole brand at this point. But if the party wasn't completely batshit crazy at this point, that is a good operating principle to not waver and not run from others and let them dictate the terms of your candidacy and the conversation. She is strong in that way, and that might be enough just to carry her through this primary, even though the polling doesn't look that good for her right now, because everybody else is such a mess, and just responding to outside factors as opposed to sticking to their guns.
Well, I don't know that there's much room for her to back off that, but the van that she has is like, there's 4 other people running. I guess there was 4 other people, not 3. And, it's hard to imagine that one of them is going to be like, it's hard for me to tell whether I like the Mike Lindell person or the person who feels that the server's been scrubbed. Those 4 seem like they're going to split the vote. But we'll see. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 502 area code. Who's this? I think this is a person who's been IMing us. 502. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Hold on one second. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, this is
Oh, great.
from Atlanta.
Say again. Say again. Your phone broke up.
Jeff from Atlanta.
Oy, your cell phone connection is pretty bad, Jeff.
How about now?
That's better until you just moved.
Yeah, can you make it concise?
How about now?
That's great.
Okay, perfect. Well, hey guys, long-time listener, first-time caller, originally from Louisville, Kentucky, but just wanted to share about this Chad Meredith guy, the anti-abortion judge that the Biden administration wants to put up apparently. So the governor, Andy Beshear, was asked yesterday during their weekly press conference about this guy, and he actually recounted this story that's been pretty much memory hold, even for people who live in Kentucky. And if you recall, right, Beshear beat Matt Bevin in 2019 by like 5,000 votes in a contest of about 1.4 million. And one of the many things that did Bevin in was, in disgrace, he had pardoned, dozens of criminals, including murderers and child rapists. And so this guy, Chad Meredith, was Matt Bevin's deputy general counsel during his entire gubernatorial term. And he's the state solicitor general right now under the attorney general, Daniel Cameron. And I should also say that this guy's never even been a judge. I mean, he's just a run-of-the-mill Federalist Society lawyer.
Yeah.
So anyway, this guy apparently worked to execute these pardons alongside Governor Bevin. And I just want to, I hate to share this kind of story, but just to highlight really how terrible this is one of the people that was pardoned was this 43-year-old man, Micah Shodel, who he was going to serve 23 years. He was convicted, and supposedly Bevin and his legal team's rationale for issuing the pardon was that the 9-year-old hymen was still intact. I mean, it's just disgusting. And so anyway, he now says that he had no meaningful involvement with any of these controversial pardons, but the state and these other parties are asking for documents, and you guessed it, he's citing attorney-client privilege. So final thing I'll say, I don't share this to depress people, on the left or to not engage. I share this because I want people to call the White House and know about these things, because it's not even making it past the local news.
Yeah.
7-6.
You're breaking up. I'm sorry.
But most of it, we heard most of it, so.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Right,
yeah. Well, we got the gist. I mean, yeah, this. We don't even know what Biden theoretically got in exchange for this. If he even if he backs off this because he's getting so much bad press, the fact, and Bradley said this yesterday, the fact that he had the impulse to do this in and of itself is so depressing. We don't even know what Chad Meredith, like this Federalist Society guy, what Biden might be getting in exchange from Mitch McConnell, which is either nothing or also nothing. Because even if McConnell promised him something, there's no chance McConnell doesn't renege on that promise.
It is, at the very least, it shows the delusion is not just for show. I mean, that's the best thing I can say about it. He's living it too. So, let's see. What should we play here?
We got a late edition Dave Rubin clip if you wanted me to.
Oh God, let's do it. I mean, now apparently, is Jordan Peterson been banned from Twitter or something?
Yeah, he's banned for basically being an anti-trans bigot against Elliot Page. We have that too. We can get
Clearly,
into.
I think tweeting this on purpose so one can get banned, and claim, right? I mean,
that's yeah. I mean,
they all understand the terms of service at this point. They're just hoping that they can get a 48-hour suspension, and then it's a bit of a gravy train for the next few days. I've been censored.
Yeah, exactly. Dave Rubin and Crowder are both on it. So here's the thing he's censored for. I'll put it up. And it was a tweet says, and I guess I'll read it.
Just read it.
Remember when pride was a sin and Ellen Page, he calls him, just had her breast removed by a criminal physician. So dead names Elliot Page and calls the physician a criminal physician, and there's nothing beside that would make you call that physician a criminal physician, except if you think any sort of trans-affirming care is criminal. And Peterson just has to delete that tweet, and he can get his Twitter back, and he said he's not going to.
Because he's a warrior, and he stands for things. And it's so coincidental. It's so coincidental that he is being censored at this time, aka censoring himself and making a big deal about it, at the same time that his Daily Wire Plus show launches.
One other irony I would just note before we get into this Rubin thing is Jordan Peterson, the only reason anybody knew his name is because he was hyperventilating hysterically about a pro-trans bill that said you should maybe be towards your students who identify, you should just accept their pronouns. Jordan Peterson said that that was part of a Marxist plot somehow, and he will go to jail over that. And now he's saying any doctors who provide trans-affirming care are criminals.
Right. I mean, but people should understand where he's traversed here, right? His whole complaint was like, you can't make me say a pronoun just because that person wants a pronoun. I'm not going to do that.
That's a slippery slope.
And now it's no longer about him, because it doesn't make a damn difference to Jordan Peterson's life how Elliot Page identifies or what he has done to transition. It doesn't implicate anything in Jordan Peterson's life. But so he's moved from, you can't impose this on me, to I'm going to impose it on him or her or whatever.
Yeah.
And that is the natural progression, right? I mean, you start with it's an offense, it's an offense to me, but really we know what it is.
Yep.
Here is Dave Rubin.
They had a big long sit down yesterday called "Gay Parenting: Promises and Pitfalls," I believe was the title of it.
Oh, okay.
This is a part of like them trying to integrate Peterson fully into Daily Wire Plus.
We have to. When I see this now, suddenly, like, when we announced that we were having kids, there was some pushback online from more religious people on the right. By the way,
pause it. Some pushback.
Some
pushback.
Some can be a lot, or some can be a
most
little.
Comments.
But in this case, it was pretty much all of his fans.
To be fair, there was probably like 25% that were like, "I support you, Dave," but those comments were vastly outnumbered. You can go check the video.
Yep.
Well, some pushback.
People on the right. By the way, 99% of it was all anonymous people. It was virtually nobody certainly nobody that I knew. There were one or two people that had blue checks on Twitter, but it was all these people.
Pause it. I'm sorry.
Talking.
The people that he does know, though, like Ben Shapiro, said that they would never go to his wedding. So, but there were also people that he didn't know who were also insulting him.
Also, his boss was very clearly like, I don't support you fully, but like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Glenn Beck, saying like, it's all right, Glenn, it's all right.
And he says blue checks like they're liberals. No, it was like blue check conservatives that were like, what is this?
Totally.
Yeah, but
blue checks on Twitter, but it was all these people, talking about the sanctity of marriage and all of these things. But I'm sympathetic to conservatives who go, boy, we let gay marriage happen, and look what's happened since. Now we're into all this gender stuff, and they're literally teaching gender theory to 5-year-olds who know nothing about gender.
Let's also be clear. They didn't let gay marriage happen. It was the Supreme Court, and they're going to try and reverse it. And they literally did everything they could to run on it in 2004, successfully, I think, to bring out the evangelicals. George Bush called for a constitutional amendment on primetime public television. But, that is history that is almost 8 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old. So you can't expect Dave to know any of that.
Literally teaching gender theory to 5-year-olds who know nothing about gender or sex or anything else. I see it. I see what they were worried about. And unfortunately, the left, you tweeted out something a couple of weeks ago. I was never a conservative until the liberals decided there were no rules. I'm paraphrasing you roughly. But I'm sympathetic to that. So much of all of the things that we knew, we no longer know at a societal level, apparently. So what do we do going back to the conservatives that were worried that this is where we were going to end up? In some sense, I should probably be their greatest hero, because it's like, oh, here's someone who wanted to enter civilized society, wanted to affirm most of the long-fought, time-tested ideals, wanted to enter the world with those things, help defend that world. It happens to be a little different than we would think, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's two guys. I can't deny it. I should sort of be a hero to them. It's not the ideal one that they went for, but it's approximately close enough that this should be pretty good. I suppose that will be my challenge in life.
Well, I think,
maybe that's.
but I also think that's probably true. But you also said earlier that as far as you're concerned, they also have a point.
There is a point there.
Okay, so what's the point?
Well, there has to be a point there because, look, gay marriage was legalized, I think, at a federal level in the United States in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. So that we're now 7 years off of that.
Right.
And look at all of the craziness that has happened since. I am not directly connecting it to that. But when you change fundamental structures, some weird things are going to happen. This is, again, where I would lay most of the blame here. I would lay on the sort of liberal establishment where nobody was willing to defend anything.
It reminds me of, like, you know, when you have a friend who's dating somebody that nobody likes, right? And they're trying to convince everybody that this person's really great, and no one's giving them what they want in the conversation of, like, no, we also like him or her. So they keep talking and they're trying to sell them to you, and the audience is just not really having it. Like the friends are just like, okay, if you say so, right? That's how I feel with the insecurity that radiates off Dave Rubin as he's trying to talk to Jordan Peterson about why basically conservatives should like him more.
Well, he's trying to make the argument that conservatives should like him more. But the other part of the problem he has is that he's arguing my marriage, speaking as Dave Rubin now, and my adoption of my children are really illegitimate. And we should reverse these things. I mean, that's where the logical conclusion of what he's saying, that by allowing gay marriage, we now have just basically unshackled society where gender is fluid.
And from the perspective of those people, it's not just gay marriage. Dave's having kids. He's raising kids with another man. And they had a big, long part in that with Jordan Peterson. Like, and is like, is this even possible? Well, you're going to fundamentally lack, and you have to be really careful, right? Like they poo-poo that idea that that's even possible.
And the
too.
kids are being born via surrogate, right?
Yeah,
that's the case. Another layer of that of unnaturality for conservatives.
I mean, Rubin, it really, we're getting into incredibly despicable territory for what Dave Rubin is doing, because they're coming for gay marriage, and they're going to come for gay adoption as well. It may take a couple of years, but Rubin's still a young guy, and they're coming for. Talk about being a capo. This is what we're looking at now.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there trying to sort of walk this tightrope with, like, I'm one of the good ones. I'm one of the good gays that, was honest about why I wanted to get married.
Yep.
Not only is Rubin deluding himself, and of course he has to, because all of his ability to make money is predicated on that. And he already went public with the fact that he was adopting, I guess surrogating children.
Yeah.
And he thinks that he can protect himself, but throw everyone else under the bus.
Yep.
It's gross. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
There are historical models for this. Like I said,
Candace Owens is a living example of somebody who, like the right wingers who are a part of the groups that the right wing hates. They feel the need to overcompensate with every breath. So, we played a clip yesterday where she, out of the blue, mentions how there was no abortions during slavery, right? There's a reason.
Right, because they were trying to, that was like a product development.
Yes, yeah. and there were, by the way. But she goes out of her way to do that because she knows that she has to, like, every other 3 words, say to their audience, no, this is your beliefs are actually valid, and I'm one of the good ones. And Dave Rubin's just doing that for gay people as he throws trans people under the bus.
Yeah, and it's not just trans people. Of course, he throws them under the bus multiple times, but it's also, he talks about how he met his partner at Gay Pride. And he's like, it wasn't like it is now, you know, all the crazy stuff. And also, he was wearing an American flag. I don't know if you could even do that anymore at Gay Pride. And I mean, yeah.
Well, you know, I got to say, though, I do think that in many respects, you know, someone like Rubin is going to be, it's going to be even worse. It's even worse because there, you know, you will have a continued, you know, amount of racism, but Candace Owens will always, if she stays this, she will always be protected because they do need her voice. But at one point, it's going to turn on the right. And Dave Rubin is not going to be protected. There's nothing he can say that is going to be protected. He will have to go through conversion therapy. He will have to pretend that he doesn't have children. He will not be accepted as is. And like I say, it is maybe a year out, maybe 2 years, maybe 5, maybe 10. But he cannot exist. His life cannot exist in this Republican Party. And he doesn't understand that he is not only is he watching the trains head in that direction, he is pushing them. He is greasing those rails, and it's disgusting.
As he gets paid a lot of money in the short term to grease the rails.
It really is something.
The rope
to
that
watch.
he's hanging himself with is like made of gold, but you know, he's still doing it.
Yep, it really is stunning at this point. He doesn't see what's coming, or he's just, you know, afraid to realize it.
Or he's cashing out while he can.
He's gripping as hard as he can to, you know, pay that mortgage.
Where should we go here next?
See, like that Rubin clip should have been funnier, but we're in such a depressing time that it's just not.
Well, Rubin is becoming is becoming a different kind of figure now.
Yeah,
he really is.
Well, actually, DeSantis sent him baby presents, 2 onesies for the kids.
Well, I can't wait for that to be used, deployed against DeSantis.
Yeah.
Let's just go with these 2 guys. I've experience with both these guys. It's been a long time since we talked about Mike Cernovich. We have, of course, been laughing at him more.
Man,
you know.
Charlie.
But here's Charlie Kirk.
He looks bad.
Cernovich is
like,
better
I'm
than Kirk
sorry.
does.
I'm not trying to. I don't know.
All right. Well, pop this up here. This is yesterday, Charlie Kirk show. Kirk now, of course, is, you know, he's trying to become the next Limbaugh, one donut at a time. Couldn't help myself. Go ahead. Play. I'm sorry.
I know.
How do you think that spiritual dimension manifests itself in politics or in culture, if at all?
Well, once your eyes have been opened a little bit, or in my case, you know, my eyes have been open a little bit, you see things. You learn, the number one thing I learned intellectually is that the timeline the demons are on is not on the timeline that we're on. Demons have your whole life. Because I had a demon, you know, visit me and offered me all this temptations. And
in the ayahuasca or just generally?
On ayahuasca, yeah.
Wow.
And I was offered all these temptations, and I thought, no, I don't want any of this. And I expected the demon to like lash out at me. And the demon said, that's okay. We have your whole life to get you.
There you go. Well, I mean, there's probably some truth there. I would disagree on what, you know, constitutes demons.
So that's what that guy's up to.
Yeah, I'm trying
tripping on ayahuasca and meeting demons who are tempting.
But you know, the interesting thing is that there is a metaphor there for what the conservative movement has been able to do in this country. They were not in any way. Demoralized by Roe v. Wade. They were not demoralized by Obergefell, and they know, or frankly, the establishment of the administrative state. They got all the time in the world to tear it down. It's just that with Mike Cernovich, it ends up being like something a little bit different. Are we going to play this?
Well, I think I found an image of Mike Cernovich with his demon. It's going to be scary for folks, so put it up, Bradley. Look at that.
Oh, man.
Isn't that terrifying?
Yeah, it's so scary. I was trying to get Bradley to pull up the video, the Eamon Hawke video of you looming over Steven Crowder in his nightmares, because that might have been what Cernovich saw in the demonic version of you.
I remember when Cernovich had his ayahuasca trip, and I had to spend 5 minutes. I had to tell my kids, just hang on, I'll be right back. I left the dinner table and I went to go visit it. Here, pop it up. I went to go visit Cernovich, and I was just like, hey man.
You heard that he was going to be indisposed and probably in a paranoid state.
Yep.
And so here you are.
I think we need to have a meeting with his dad. Irony alert, Steven. Stop being a bitch. Stop being a baby.
That's the demon.
That's the demon, yeah.
Well, trying to get a little bit soulful, Cernovich and Kirk. Let's go back to the phones. Calling from a 713 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Dad?
What's that?
Excuse me. Sorry. This is Johnny from Houston.
Johnny from Houston. What's on your mind, Johnny?
Okay, so I wanted to get you guys' take on how to address the right with.
Did you just call
rhetoric.
Sam Dad? I just want to see if that was the case. No? Oh,
okay.
I heard that wrong. Okay.
Okay, great. So when it comes to the right wing, I think we need to be a little bit cautious with our rhetoric. Let me explain what I mean by this, right? What the right does, like the media, politicians, is, of course, they use fear to motivate their base, right? Breaking news, but just hear me out. When it comes to our brain, whenever we're fed a lot of fear, that lights up our amygdala. And for the right, for the true believers, right? We're not talking about those that lie to their audience, but for them, that is what is lit up all the time. So what happens is that little by little silences or inhibits the areas of our brain that are responsible for critical thinking, for reasoning, for thinking logically, having empathy for others, et cetera, et cetera. So that is why when you try to shame a conservative, call them a racist, whatever insult you want to throw at them, it just does not fit. Because for them, more than anything, they are afraid. They feel an immediate threat from the left, and for them, that is the most important thing at the front of their mind, right? But what's your take on that?
Are you talking about when you're talking to a person one-on-one, or are you talking about just rhetoric in general?
Sure, yeah. Either one-on-one, maybe on Twitter, maybe in a debate. Let me give you an example. One thing that was perfect just happened to.
I mean, I think on one hand, I think you're probably right, but I think if you're saying that this is in some way leads to something prescriptive, I would just say to you, have you ever watched any significant amount of right-wing media? Because the absence of somebody calling somebody a racist is in no way a way in which to disarm conservatives, because their media is 3 steps ahead of anything that you or I could say.
What do you mean by that? I'm not sure.
I mean, they will make it up. I mean, look, listen, Jordan Peterson's a perfect example. We were just talking about him. What happened with Jordan Peterson? I'm not going to call them that person by that pronoun. And now you're saying I'm transphobic because I won't do it? I mean, they don't need someone to say you're racist or transphobic for them to believe that they're being called racist or transphobic, both as an individual or as like a group. It is they.
Oh no, I agree.
The aggrievement. There is also an aggrievement machine inside them. That.
Oh no, I agree with what you're saying. Yeah, 100%, for sure.
Okay, so if I stipulate that yes, when you call someone a racist, the winning the argument becomes harder. So what?
No. Not that it becomes harder, but that if you want to, that's fine, right? We know what they are. There's no denying it at all. But if we're actually trying to grow the movement and try to convince people, then whenever we are talking to somebody, let's say one-on-one, right? And they say something that's just completely wild. If I'm just going to call them a racist, I'm just going to end the conversation there, and then they're going to walk away still feeling righteous, right? A perfect example was Ben Burgess.
Listen, I think it's okay to do that one-on-one, but if there's somebody else watching and that person is somewhere, it is not, is not as racist as the person you're talking to, I think there's some value in it. Because I mean, and that's my sort of theory with this, is that, people are like, that libertarian caller you had on, what's the point of it? You didn't convince him of anything. But I'm not debating these people because I want to convince that individual. I'm debating these people so I can expose to other people what their ideology leads to. Because,
right.
I mean, look at Josh Hawley going on Hannity's show and saying, they're trying to, convince people that Roe v. Wade is important, or that something new has changed, or that, this is racist, or that is racist. If I'm debating Josh Hawley, I'm not debating Josh Hawley because I want to change Josh Hawley's mind. I am trying to expose where their ideology leads to, what problems it causes, and where it naturally goes. And so I agree with you. If I'm talking to one person alone and saying, I'm not going to say to them, you're a racist. I may say what you just said is racist. And I might say to them, I don't think you're racist. But if I'm standing in a group of people and somebody says that, I might handle it, in a similar fashion, but I'm not going to be as worried about alienating that individual, because my power is not going to come from that person. My power is going to come from the other people who are observing what's going on.
No, right. That's why I was saying at the beginning, this does not apply to like media figures and politicians, because of course they know what they're doing. They know they are misleading others. But my point is that if we're actually trying to get more, I agree. You're in a group of people and they're being disgusting. You can call that out, of course. But generally speaking, whenever we do want to discuss issues and actually go in with some substance, we can talk to them in a way that will minimize their fears. And that is when people will be able to listen to us a little more. And yes, I'm talking about like an audience, right? Not the person we're debating, but the audience in general, because they're afraid. That's why they think immediately of the kids and then the masks and the CRT, whatever. It scares them so much. But whenever you do,
I know that, but I can tell you this, that like, we don't have the ability more often than not to make them not afraid. I have referred to these people as having a Masada complex for 20 years because it doesn't matter what it is. They will come up with a new thing to be afraid of. This is what feeds their movement. It's aggrievement. And that aggrievement exists because there is someone coming for them. There's someone coming for their way of life. And that exists.
Right.
That is endemic in their sensibility, and it is fed to them by a well-funded right-wing media machine. And so what I'm suggesting is there is 30 to 40% of the population out there whose value in engaging is, and I'm not saying on a personal level, your family members or this and that. I'm just saying, like, if you're talking about from a political standpoint, the value is to convince other people to get more, to understand the threat they represent to our society. And there may be, nicer or better ways, but I'm not there to make them feel less afraid, because frankly, that's a Pyrrhic enterprise. That is futile. That's the way they are. That's why they respond to whatever is thrown out on any given week. That's why, that's why a guy named Tucker McNear Swanson Carlson, who has, went to St. George's prep school and got every job he ever got because his father was a right-wing operative. That's why he can go up there and be an everyman, because they're eating this stuff up. And so, we can expend energy on trying to keep these people from feeling upset, but it's wasted energy. I appreciate the call.
All right. Thank you.
I mean, I'm not saying that we should be rude or you should be rude or you should necessarily write off everybody. Yes, do your best. But and yes, going at somebody is going to make them feel fear. Sometimes you got to decide whether it's appropriate or not, or whether you have the stomach to do that or not. But as a political, as a political prescription, the value of interacting with some of these people is really just to show other people to expose them. Like, there are people out there who you're not going to convince.
Yeah, and also, you're going to unconvince a lot of people if you just have amiable conversations with confirmed racists.
Again, we've talked about this with Digby. People need to see your reaction. That when you're talking about convincing people, your reaction indicates to those other people, what's going on here. So, Zabadude, counterpoint, maximize right-wing fear whenever possible to cause a rise in agoraphobia amongst their base. There you go. Calling from a 218 area code. We got a lot of people stacked up. A lot of people been on the phone for exactly 41 minutes. In fact, everybody, oh my God, I don't think I've ever seen that. Everybody's been on the phone for the exact same amount of time. Calling 218 area code. Who's this? Who are you calling from?
Is this me?
It is you.
This is Pat the hippie from Western Minnesota calling.
Pat the hippie from Western Minnesota. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Just wanted to shout out to Matt. I'm from Fargo area, so I kind of understand and sympathize and feel his pain when he talks about home. So, Matt, you're not alone there. So, guys, I wanted to call in and just and talk to you about my area and maybe get some ideas from you on how we can turn some things around over here. Minnesota has this weird history of being weirdly, with the DFL party, they've been very progressive in some areas, of course not perfect, but compared to their neighbors, much more progressive. My district, which used to have Colin Peterson, a very moderate Dem for 30 years, now has Michelle Fischbach. And I'm curious, how can we organize out here to, at a bare minimum, get us back to where we were? Because that switch from Fischbach to Colin Peterson, I mean, Michelle Fischbach is maybe a little more quieter than others, but just as extreme as the rest, I think, in my opinion. So just kind of curious on what do you think we can do from organizing? City politics out here is really limited, being that we're so rural, but just curious what your thoughts are on how we can combat that and try and get us back to at least a Dem.
I mean, I don't know the area. Matt, what's your thinking?
I mean, for the Democratic Party in North Dakota, I mean, it's been a while since I followed it super closely, but I mean, I remember when they had somebody go up against Rick Bergen, it was just some old Democrat that literally in the paper was like, they selected me to run for this office. I mean, I would join. Yeah. I mean, I think I mean, I'm not sure. I feel like Fargo-Moorhead had a few DSA candidates, maybe won some local elections. Like, that's where I would be putting my energy. Cause I don't, unless the Democrats, because what Democrats have they come up with? Heidi Heitkamp?
Yeah, well, I think
it's a dead party.
I think the difficulty also is the fact that Colin Peterson was the rep for about 25, 30 years, was the head of the agriculture committee, and is was one of the most arch-conservative Democrats in the caucus. So to begin with, that was like the profile of the seat and kind of how he buttered his bread, so to speak. I honestly think potentially just having, if there's any progressive candidate, or even like anyone at all, to be filling like for that general election to not just be Fischbach running unopposed, basically, I think it's a victory in itself. And I think you just have to start really small, because it's not as if it was Paul Wellstone being
there's the muscle
replaced.
memory for that seat.
Yeah.
Right. You have to undo that.
I think there are agricultural policies in general that are available to Democrats that, and sort of broadly speaking, anti-monopolistic policies and anti-corporate policies. I mean, look, I think for many years, I remember talking, interviewing different people, and I appreciate the phone call. I mean, I think this sort of applies, about right-wing authoritarianism and how you deal with it and right-wing populism, as it were, and how you deal with it. And, I think it becomes clearer and clearer that both because of their ideology, I think the problems with the sort of, for lack of a better term, neoliberal ideology is that it has implications in terms of their tactics and their strategies that are not up to the task. And B, like, you're starting to get to the point where you're starting to compete on territory that should have been Democratic or left liberal territory. And these right-wing authoritarians are starting to pick up, some of these things, largely rhetorical, but and maybe exclusionary, but they're offering certain things to people. And, we're starting to see that a little bit. And, the idea of like, we need, when they say we need to deal with Americans first, they may or may not be sincere about it, but they're offering, or at least implying, material benefit for people. And though they don't deliver, it's asking a lot for voters to really fully assess what they're getting delivered in certain instances. So let's play this clip. This is number 7. Donald Trump responding yesterday on Newsmax to the testimony that we saw from Cassidy Hutchinson, his chief of staff's essentially number 1 aide.
Because, some whack job can say this stuff and get away with it, and other things, that I wanted guns at my rally. Okay, now I'm speaking. Why would I want guns? I don't want people standing with guns in my rally.
I don't remember seeing any AR-15s at
well,
the Capitol.
pause it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And the other
that's true in some instances. At the NRA convention after the Uvalde massacre, Donald Trump spoke, and he asked, and his team required, that there would not be any weaponry there during that speech. The reports, though, so it seems like that is something that he wants in certain instances. But if we are to believe Cassidy Hutchinson, there's a distinction in between that speech and what happened on January 6th. So
because he wanted the roving metal detectors gone because it was inhibiting his crowd size, and he also said they're not here to hurt me.
Right, and it could be for other reasons. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, now I'm speaking. Why would I want guns? I don't want people standing with guns in my rally.
I don't remember seeing any AR-15s at the Capitol.
Well, she wasn't complaining. And the other thing about this woman, she wanted to work for me after January 6th. She was a big Trump fan. She wanted to work for me in Florida, and we chose not to bring her down because I got very bad things. I hardly knew her. And I said, well, if she's no good, I got somebody called up, numerous people, that she's not good. I won't say why that she's not good, but plenty of reasons.
Why?
Plenty of reasons.
I'm not going to say that, but I'm going to say that she was not respected by the people in the White House. So they thought she shouldn't go down. I was going down to Florida with a group of people, great group of people, patriots, and her name was thrown out there, and they said, stay away from her. They said bad things about her. And then I see her, and I hardly know who she is. And then I see this woman getting up, and she's making up stories like one after another. But the craziest of all was that I tried to commandeer, I think they used that word, I tried to commandeer a car with Secret Service agents telling them to take us down to the Capitol. It was totally false, and that a person can get away with it. And then I watch the Times and the Washington Post, and I get reviews on MSDNC and CNN. They hardly even talk about the fact that she's been totally discredited. So
the things they were saying about her is that she's a brunette. She's a 9. She's not even a 10, Donald. Mr.
Look,
President.
it's one thing to have subpar people at the White House, but I am not going to allow that to happen at Mar-a-Lago.
No.
They are not going south.
We
Only
vetted her.
10s there.
We had to vet her, not for the White House, but from the White House to get to Mar-a-Lago, because we're okay with subpar people working at the White House, but if you're going to be at Mar-a-Lago, you got to be the best. We only bring the best people. We let the real hacky people. Her office. This is what I thought was really effective with her testimony. Did you see this? They
Yes.
did the 3D representation of her office. Her office was like, there's like 4 or 5 offices on that hallway between Meadows and the president, and one of them was hers. Yeah, we let the subpar people get within the circle of 10 people who can talk to me.
She's like that
In the
intern that
Oval.
was working with Ron Johnson to get those fraudulent electors to Pence.
The chief of staff, maybe. But also in some Washington Post reporting about her, like there were reports that aides to Paul Ryan and Nancy Pelosi were like, she was in every single meeting we had with him. Like whenever, like we were, like
She's Mark Meadows' top aide.
Yeah, like Pelosi's aides literally followed up with him, being like, "Is she supposed to be here?" Like she was omnipresent. Like
Yeah. I mean, I find it really funny too how like he's so lazy. He didn't even come up with it. Just if your political like life you perceive is hanging by a thread here, and this testimony is saying all of these things about you, how you tried to overturn democracy, you think he could have come up with like one thing about her that was discrediting?
Concrete.
I don't want to say it. I can't think of
can't say it.
anything right now because I didn't prepare.
What a hard bargain Rob Finnerty drove by asking him again after he said he wasn't going to say it.
I know,
that was pretty hard hitting.
I'm such
I like
a good
how
guy.
he also just couldn't say, well, one of the things, let me just say, the people said she was a liar.
Yeah.
Like, he couldn't even come up with it. He
Come
couldn't
up
even
with
think of it.
something.
No, she was just very, girly. She was like a
Yes.
girl. She was a girl, and I don't need to say anything else. I think we can all imagine things that would be problematic with her.
There was one week of the month where she was just such a
What was the word
bitch.
they used? Commandeered, they said. Folks, I got to say, our phone portion of the program is over for this Friday. We often don't get to phones on Friday, so, I mean, I'm sorry
Be
about
grateful.
that. Be absolutely great. You should be grateful that we commandeered the phones.
Honest loyalty.
All right, we got to play this clip, too. Here is Trump dealing, and there's been a lot of reporting lately about Trump being upset with DeSantis. And DeSantis has been starting to make his move. And again, I am surprised. I am not seeing people on 4chan and other Republican forums, including Truth Social, and frankly on Twitter, people trying to stir up some dissent, as maybe DeSantis is behind what's going on on the January 6th hearings. Maybe this is, McCarthy and McConnell trying to get Trump out of the picture. It's possible. I'd be surprised. But wouldn't be surprised. I'm just surprised I haven't seen many people writing these type of things on social media boards. I mean, it would be tough.
Makes you think.
It makes you think. But here is Donald Trump sitting down with Newsmax's Rob Finnerty and talking about DeSantis.
Could you envision a world, sir, where there is a Trump-DeSantis ticket in 2024?
Well, I get along with him. I was very responsible for his success because I endorsed him and he went up like a rocket ship, just like I endorsed Mary Miller the other day, who supposedly was not going to win and she won. Just like Darren Bailey is doing great. He just
All
won.
these little guys.
Is there any more? Can we play any more of that?
I mean, we can go a little bit further.
I think he's going to beat Pritzker, one of the worst governors of the country.
The Democrats apparently wanted that race, several of these
They say that.
They're missing something.
No, they like to say that. They always like to say that. They take somebody that's doing well and they say, he's the one we want. It's called disinformation. Just like Russia, Russia, Russia. It's disinformation. Right. They said it about Mastriano, who's great.
What about
Mastriano
DeSantis?
in
Mr. President?
Pennsylvania.
Mr.
They said,
President?
oh, it was
What
obvious.
about
I endorsed
DeSantis?
him. It was obvious he was going to win. And they said it about him
Do you
in
not want to
Pennsylvania.
talk about DeSantis? No, keep going. Keep going.
Oh, we want him. They don't want him. It's just the opposite.
What about
but they say
DeSantis?
we want him or we want Bailey, and that's not the way it works. But
I asked you about
think we're going to have
DeSantis.
some tremendous candidates and some very successful candidates.
Just final question. Would you
Completely steamrolls.
Message
steamrolls.
received, Mr. President. You don't want me to ask you about that. Okay.
I mean, he's right in a way, right? DeSantis got to Congress by reading his children Trump's books and a bedtime story, and he's been yes.
And if you watch DeSantis now, it's like
right.
I think that would probably, if there, I mean, I'm still so hard pressed to think DeSantis would ever actually primary Trump if Trump was putting his hat in the ring. But I think if he actually did, one of the most convincing lines of attack would just be like, "You stole my shtick." Like you're not original. Like you have none of your own moves. Like you have basically risen to prominence not just for my support, but from also aping me. Basically,
he's a mini me.
Yeah.
He's a mini me.
Ron, I'm the Don.
Mini Ron.
You're the Ron.
Yes.
I'm the Don. You're the Ron. Deep State Donnie.
I'd call him.
I mean Ronnie. Wait,
I'd
no,
call
no.
him-
Deep State DeSantis. Damn it. Yeah.
Rerun.
Rerun. Ah.
Because he's copying me.
Little rerun.
I don't know
DeSantis.
about that guy.
I don't know. Mine was better.
That's
He
what I
barely
call him.
beat Andrew
Rerun.
Gillum.
I call him rerun because he's a rerun of me. That's why. That's gonna
Might be a little too much thought for him. He just like needs an adjective that starts with either R or D.
He's got to bring back the nicknames.
I mean, that was the best part of the primary.
Little Marco.
Should we do this thing with Carlson? It's interesting. There's a lot of angles on Tucker Carlson going down there and cheering for Bolsonaro, who is the Brazilian president, trying to run again. When are the elections?
October.
We've got many months before the election. But what's interesting is here, Bolsonaro is talking about the COVID vaccine. Now, my understanding is Tucker Carlson has claimed that he's not vaccinated, right?
Yes.
My other understanding
Or he
is,
hasn't said anything really, but he traveled to Hungary, remember, to interview Viktor Orban when that was like you needed a vaccine to travel to Europe. Maybe not Hungary, but I'm not sure.
I don't buy it. He always just says the whole like, "Oh,
My
what
understanding is-
sex position did you have with your wife
Yes,
last
yes,
night?"
yes, yeah.
in Brazil, you need to be vaccinated if you're visiting the country as well. So that'd be interesting. But
I mean, I wouldn't put it past a guy like Tucker to get like from the Orban and Bolsonaro government a carve out for things like
Oh
that.
yeah, and he could get on a private plane and then like just go right to the hotel,
Man
meet
of the
Bolsonaro there. Yeah.
Go ahead. Let's play this.
Why didn't you take the vaccine?
Olha só, quando apareceu o vírus,
When the virus actually hit strongly in March 2020, people began to seek out the vaccine, of course, against the virus. And I, too, of course, sought a medication because we began to see cases surfacing, started seeing the number of cases begin to go up. Now, someone who contracts the virus like I did, I mean, the vaccine doesn't really help. I mean, you don't take a vaccine if you have already been contaminated. The vaccine would be innocuous. You should rather take the medication. And in Brazil, of course, I studied the issue. I called other countries, including in sub-Saharan
I did my
Africa,
own research.
and Brazilian doctors and physicians, because there were people out there who either did not catch the virus, or when they did catch the virus was not strong enough to send them to the hospital or to kill them. And in Brazil, we saw the emergence of 2 medications that began to be used more widely. I myself took them when contaminated. But the global pressure all over the world from the media outlets and from the pharmaceutical companies, I mean, they were all against the early treatment.
I wonder if he's hinting at like hydroxy.
Yeah, or ivermectin.
I was waiting for him to say, yeah.
Interesting to hear how sort of it's hard to know exactly if the translation is exactly sort of capturing the exact but the QAnon and the sort of vaccine conspiracy stuff is all there. It really is amazing.
It's global, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. It is interesting too because didn't Bolsonaro get COVID twice at least?
He's got COVID multiple times, more than twice.
Yeah.
Michael's reaction. Do we have that?
We can find that, but
we have at least the audio, don't we?
But yeah, Bolsonaro, you idiot! No one's saying take the COVID vaccine after you, like while you're infected. COVID. Nobody's saying that. It's a way to mitigate the effects if you get it, and also it helps you not get it. That's the case. Matt can't find it.
All right, let me do some IMs here, and then we're gonna wrap things up.
July 4th weekend, isn't that fun that we get to celebrate our country as my rights got stripped away a week from today?
Yep, there you go. Independence Day, but not as independent for everybody.
Nope.
Sorry about that. One of the Koch brothers, just to one-up the Democratic supporter yesterday, I would like to say that in response to donation emails, I send cum tributes to Biden. There you go.
Okay.
Sam from Ottawa, happy Canada Day. Ottawa is once again filled with 3 dumb conveyors protesting for something. While at the same time, 4 new variants are ramping up in Ottawa. Our COVID wastewater is spiking despite weather getting better. Bad side for the fall. BT from Connecticut. Little hit of serotonin. May I successfully saved a friend from going down the Jordan Peterson rabbit hole by playing them the passage from his audiobook where he dreamt about his grandmother making a paintbrush out of her pubes and shoving it into his mouth or something like that.
He's got issues.
Who doesn't do that? Travis from Georgia. What's up, MR crew? Overlooking the Dems being feckless and bound by bipartisanship, you would think would be possible to prosecute Trump, then make an argument for impeachment of every unelected appointee Trump has put up, including the Supreme Court, and also impeach Thomas for obstruction and conspiracy. Is David Feldman still in Guantanamo Bay? I have gotten no comment on that, but we'll hear it later. We'll have him soon. Binder Kirk kissing Pelosi. What is your thoughts on General Flynn pleading the fifth when asked if he believed in a peaceful transfer of power by the January 6th committee? Sam, you suck big time. I think he's pleading the fifth because he's afraid of answering some other questions. Is my guess. Dick Cheney fan account. Sam, longtime listener, first-time member. On behalf of the LGBTQ community, I nominate you for the status of gay icon. If you're in a position to do that, I accept.
I mean, that seems a bit generous. Like, I feel like the gay icon, I'm not a part of the gay community, so what do I know? But, I mean, you're no Cher. You're no Lady Gaga. Like, what is this?
I'll take any accolades.
All right.
You got to have somebody who doesn't have any style.
Right.
Just to show that you're inclusive. I think that's the idea.
Diversifying the portfolio of gay icons. Yeah. That's some logic I can pretend to get behind.
Gary Busey Brain, it's ironic that Trump appointments to the Supreme Court overturned Roe, since Trump is rumored to have paid for numerous abortions and has also had numerous gerbils aborted. Okay. Talia from Tampa. Justice Alito is the biggest, actually incel debate nerd ever. Last time I saw a response to the crisis as anemic as the Democratic Party, it was coming from the Uvalde Police Department. The existence of the institution of the Supreme Court is a threat to society. Yes, lawmakers need to codify Roe and statutorily abolish judicial review, but guess what? they would end up back in the courts where these same types of justices would rule those statutes violate the Constitution. Yeah. The remedy needs to be in the Constitution by amendment or total rewrite. Dave from Jamaica. Nice to see Kirk's face filling out. Voting is a tool, nothing more, indeed. To the caller from 2010, when you're doing a reach out, you go for the non-aligned first. De-radicalizing right-wingers takes years, and it takes the person in question having doubts. Also, light touch is not universal. Some people respond better to a challenge. Silver piping. My God, that panel was a crap show. I think he's talking about the Wyoming stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Illuminati kids, I would say in the case of the Dem leadership, probably a lot of literal paralysis going along with the figurative kind. All right, 10 more. Sam's mustache. Sam, with how depressing the news has been lately, maybe it's time you do another call to challenge it and all libertarians. We need more comic relief around here, indeed. Nick from Oklahoma, I make good money. What is the most effective way to deploy it to reduce the power of the GOP? Candidates, organizations, local Democratic Party? I think, like pound for pound, I think the Wisconsin state party is a good place to donate money because Wisconsin is sure to be a key race. I would say Pennsylvania, like Fetterman and Shapiro's race, really important. I would say local candidates. I wouldn't do any sort of general, I wouldn't do giving for like the DCCC, or I would earmark your money directly. We'll have more of that coming soon. I think Aaron Kleinman has a good program running on targeting state races too. We'll talk to him. 2 kids in a trench coat. In a truly just society, the justice who voted to overturn Roe would be charged with accessory to homicide for every woman who dies because she can't get the medical care they need. The best leftist had my daughter participate in a theater camp held at a church last week. One of her pre-pandemic friends was there, and they were so happy to see each other after a couple of years. Turns out her mother just got over COVID, and the father was home with COVID. The girl didn't show up yesterday, and shockingly, she has COVID. Now, me and my daughter are sick. My daughter spent time with my parents the other day, so my mother's freaking out. We've managed to escape COVID to this point, but I'm assuming we have it now. We have very sore throats and sinus infections along with other symptoms. Try and get some Paxlovid if you can. I use Flonase. That was very helpful for me. Union Jack. Sam, I've always looked up to the way you and crew have been educating us with in-depth interviews, but please take this criticism with an open mind if possible. There we go. For abortion rights coverage, you have not featured any women activists who are from minority communities. That's not true. Our first person we had on, isn't that right, Bradley? First person we had on was a law professor from, where is she from?
Berkeley, Kiara Bridges.
Yeah.
She's a black woman. Dr. Leah Torres.
Yeah.
From the West Alabama Women's Health Clinic.
So they're trying to say basically, but not activists.
I see. We haven't had any activists on. No, we haven't. I mean, not recently, but we're just getting started on this. We're going to go from the legal interpretations, and we're going to have a lot more going forward. But yeah, fair enough. Either migrants, African Americans, or Latinos, they are the worst affected. Most, if not all, the guests have been white women. That's not true.
Inaccurate, yeah.
Same with covering transgenders' rights or the vitriol against drag shows. Well, the only guest we've had on in terms of transgender rights was Chase Strangio, right?
I'm not sure if we had any more, yeah.
I mean, I think there's an argument that we need more people from the transgender community on the show, but I don't. I'm not having cis people come and talk about. We're talking about it because we don't always have. We don't always have guests covering things. Most of the talk that we're talking about with the vitriol against drag shows has been us attacking Steven Crowder. But I mean, it's not a. I agree with that point. No, if the transgender community featured in an interview or someone who has performed as drag or believes in the expression, you speak up for them. But why not make your guests more in such issue diverse? I mean, we've been talking about, we do need, I think, trans people on terms of trans rights. To be honest with you, it's like I don't really care about, if dressing in drag is a good art form or not. Like, I don't care. I mean, it's like, any more than I care about any other performance. I think that people have a right to do it, and I don't think it's detrimental to people. And I don't feel like I need to have somebody on to justify that as an art form. I just accept that it is, and I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is that
yeah. Sorry,
but I think there's other arguments in there. But
yes,
there's also the point Mike Lowe's made, which is that like there's also a selective bias against people who are saying having trouble paying rent. Like typically guests are from people who are getting income. So I mean, I think that's another thing that's really difficult to control for.
Yeah. All right. Where are we? 4 more? Chibbles. Yes. Boss makes $1 while I make a dime. That's why I take 20-minute poops on company time. I got to tell Saul that. He'll like that. Pause it. If the phrase every accusation is an admission has truth behind it, then the Democrats saying we need a strong Republican Party is almost certainly an indication that the Democrats are a weak party. Katie Sheppy. As someone who moved from right to left very slowly over a number of years, I don't think watering down the threat of right-wing movement would have convinced me any sooner. Everyone's journey is different, but personally it took me real-world exposure to injustice, meeting more people and learning more about history. The reason you're blacklisted by all these famous right-wingers is because your approach is effective, and they know that. You're unapologetic and confident in the case you make, and it helps that you're not lying, LOL. Even if the concern is a communication strategy, you're way more likely to plant a seed this way than if you fail to emphasize the danger of this movement. Thank you. All right. 2 more. Hiney Hole. Does this EPA ruling mean the libertarians will finally get their jetpacks? They're on the way. And the final IM of the day.
The week.
Oh. Is from Chucky Sumner. It's being reported that McConnell deal is the GOP will stop blue-slipping district court judges. It's unnecessary. Dick Durbin could stop accepting them at any time. He should. They didn't accept them when we were when we were in the minority on that committee. Blue slips are just Senate institutional nonsense. People should call Durbin's office and demand he stop accepting blue slips. If that's the deal, my God, that's horrible. Insane. That's insane. Not the way I want to finish this week. Let me get a different IM. God damn it. Lazy Ollie. Oh, unlikely scenario. Trump goes to jail. I don't like that one. I need a nice one. A funny one. Skippy. 20-minute dumps. Are you just hiding from your kids? Bingo!
There we go.
Matt, Bradley, Emma, great job this week. Folks, we are off Monday. No show, no pre-tape. Have a good 4th. Be that as it may. Yeah. We will be back live on Tuesday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made, don't get paid for the rope that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months shifted into years while I shifted